Good morning again. All right, this is call and response. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm Roberta Myers Douglas from Legal Action Center, and we are a partner of the Justice Reform Partnership. Today, I have the pleasure of being your MC slash taskmaster so that we can get all this information in your hands and in your ears and get you motivated and mobilized to go over there to have some good conversations with our legislators. We're going to get started today, and again, we thank you for coming out and spending the day with us. To get us started, I want to invite Tanika Nicholas up, who we lovingly call Nikki, to give some welcome remarks.
Good morning, y'all. Thank you. And you all have to bear with my voice. Tony will be doing a lot of the talking and emceeing. But I did wanted to come and share some remarks. We do have people going to be trickling in. My voice went out. We're in the sanctuary, so I guess it's fitting to say sometimes these spirits are kind of fight against you. They don't want you to do things they want us to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. Any little voice I have, I'll give it to you all because you've taken your time out to be here today, and I appreciate you. On a Tuesday, taking days or traveling, so I want to say thank you. As Tony mentioned, my name is Tanika Nicholas. I am the coalition strategist for the Justice Reform Partnership for the Southern Center for Human Rights, or the JRP, we like to call ourselves. So remember those three letters. You'll see that a lot lately today. Also, we do have live stream going on. So those of you who are joining us live streaming, thank you. Put your name in the chat where you're joining us from. We do have a coalition member who is monitoring the chat. So y'all forgive my voice, who's monitoring the chat. We'll answer questions you all may have. Share resources in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, whether it's Georgia or from beyond. So we want to thank you for joining us also via live stream. So I do have some remarks that I want to share because I worked on them. So a little voice is just going to have to give, just bear with me. If you are unfamiliar with our partnership, we're very unique. We have over 90 organizations and individuals here in the state that work for meaningful criminal, juvenile, and justice reforms here in Georgia. When I started working here 3 years ago, I said this is a coalition that brings together directly impacted people, grassroots organizations, policy experts, and community organizers. I mean, we have it all. And we're just trying to make a more fair, just system for our state. And we are doing that. Our theme this year, Rooted in Justice and Thriving Together, we brainstormed that well before the elections, a few months, probably before maybe end of September, because we knew that whatever the political outlook was going to be, it was going to be difficult for us to go through the next few years. So we came up with this theme. We knew that we were going to face challenges and we were going to have a lot of resilience we were going to carry. For myself, I stand here today as a directly impacted person, and that's a lot to carry. But for you all who are here, some of you may be directly impacted. You may have loved ones who are directly impacted. You may work in a space that support folks who are directly impacted. For whatever your reasons you're here, we just want to welcome you for being in this space. For me, it is personal and it is collective. So, our fight. We're living in a time where we fight for reform, where it's difficult. The systems we seek to change are really pushing back at us hard. Across the country and right here at Georgia, right across the street at the Gold Dome, they're really fighting back. There's silence in our voices. I mean, literally, they're trying to silence my voice. I have a voice. Restrict democracy, criminalize poverty, race, and survival, and choose punishment over humanity. But yet we are still here. We're here because we're rooted in something stronger than fear, something stronger than tactics and regressive policies. We're here because we fight for justice, not for political reasons, but it's deeply personal. We're here because we know justice is just not about resisting harm, but it's about building a system where people thrive. We're rooted in justice. We're not swayed by these temporary setbacks. We're grounded in something deeper. When we stand together, when we're organized, strategic, and unwavering, we will thrive. I always say this, this day and this movement wouldn't exist without one of our greatest leaders and our greatest founders, the late Marissa McCall Dobson. I never had the privilege of meeting or working with Marissa, but I have a job that exists because of her, and I'm very thankful because of that. One of the things that Marissa always wanted for us is that she wanted those of us who are closest to the problems to lead those changes. She didn't want us to be seen as tokens or afterthoughts, She wanted us to be expert strategists. And I always wondered, why did they put strategist behind my title? I said, well, that was a weird thing, but now I'm beginning to understand that. It's much more, because we're decision makers. I shared this quote last year because I found this as a Twitter quote from Marissa, and because a lot of my research I had to find on YouTube and online, and I found this on Twitter, and I'm like, they still keep Twitter quotes, but they kept hers. And Marissa once said, "Our commitment to issues is not new. We're not camera chasers, celebrities, or bag and wan jumpers. We will continue to defend the rights of the marginalized, and we will never sit back and let fake helpers do harm to the communities we serve." Her words remind me of something that was happening today, that we don't have to buy our seats at tables, right? If you care about justice, if you believe in a better system, we're here to commit to change. You're in this space. Whether you're directly impacted, you're an advocate, a policy leader, a community organizer, you don't have to ask for permission to fight what is right. Marissa showed us that power is given, it is taken, it's built, and it is shared. It's shared by all of you who are here today. So I want to thank you for just being here. So if y'all could just give you some applause for coming on a Tuesday. And we have beautiful weather. We've had awful weather. We have beautiful weather today. But as I begin to close, just a couple things I always want to share in this space. Because of the coalition in the space we work in, we always talk about the power of language in the work that we do. So throughout the day, we have a lot of activities, a lot of panels, but you'll hear us use person-first language. So, it shapes how we treat each other. So you'll hear us use formerly incarcerated, directly impacted, or justice impacted. We use those words instead of felon or ex-offender. You'll hear us use incarcerated person instead of prisoner or inmate. You'll hear us use young person or children impacted by the justice system instead of juvenile delinquent. So just in this space, if you're new, you'll hear us use that language, and we just ask for you to respect and use that language as well as we go out through the day. One of the things I want us to remember, that we are human beings first. Sometimes we forget that, and what's happening, what we see on the news, we forget that we're people, and we're people with families. We have pasts, but most importantly, we have futures in front of us too. So today, we have a full day of learning, a lot of advocacy, a lot of calls of actions that are going to be planned. We do have some QR codes. There was one on the table up front. As we go through the panels, scan your phones with the QR codes. The QR codes will have the agenda for today. We'll have resources for you to share, resources from the panelists and from the slides and things you can take home with you. For the flow of the day, just to give you a little bit of insight, after our first panel concludes, we're going to have walks over to the Capitol. Capitol leads will take you over if you plan to talk to your elected officials. If you choose to stay at the church, we'll have activities planned for you here, workshops, discussions on civic engagement, involuntary servitude, writing for policy changes, networking with directly impacted individuals. So we have a lot. But we do want you to make sure you join us after lunch. We do have a special honorarium for the Noah Bush family that we would want you to join us with, because we do get wrapped up in a lot of policy, but remember that policy equates to people. And it's about real people, real families, and real loss. So we want to make sure we honor our honorees today, this afternoon. So however way you engage, your voice matters, your presence matters, and I just appreciate your presence. So my voice is getting dry, so I'm going to get ready to turn it over to a place where we can ground ourselves and have some peace. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to my public policy director, which is Tiffany Roberts. Tiffany is my public policy director at Southern Center for Human Rights. Tiffany is going to get us grounded in some grounding remarks, followed by Isabel Ortero with the Southern Poverty Law Center. So they're going to get us grounded in today, and as we go through our flow of an agenda. So I just want to thank you all again.
Good morning. As Nikki mentioned, my name is Tiffany Roberts. I am the Public Policy Director at the Southern Center for Human Rights. And it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm really grateful that you saw it fit to take time out of your Tuesday to spend time with us. Nikki mentioned our beloved Marissa McCall Dotson, who this event was her brainchild, along with some of her closest friends. And the first Justice Day that I actually attended was here in this building, and my daughter, who is now 10, was like 2. And the power of this event, even through the years where we had to meet remotely, has really never been lost. And it's important because we need gatherings like this now more than ever, because we cannot capitulate to the evils of our criminal legal systems, and that's something that Marissa knew really well. I'm grateful to offer these opening remarks for Justice Day 2025 with the theme, Rooted in Justice, Thriving Together. When Nikki told me that this was the theme, I said, oh, that's really nice, that's beautiful, right? And we didn't know what 2025 would bring. We did not know what it would look like to see the attempted dismantling of our poverty safety net. We did not know what it would look like for someone to try to dismantle the Department of Education. But even though we did not know those things, the theme is still fitting. Some of us may feel like what we are going through, what we are seeing in our world is worse than our worst night terror. But the image on the flyer is a reminder. And so I know sometimes I come and I say things and I bring you statistics and factoids. But I'm not going to do that this morning because I'm offering you the grounding remarks. And when we think about what grounding is, it means we need to know what kind of soil our feet are planted on, what our call to action is, how our purpose can pour into the world and make it more deserving of our children. This flyer has an image of a beautiful tree, the Justice Day flyer does, and it has winding roots and strong branches. And that tree is just before the shadow of a protest. Through faith traditions and folklore, trees have come to represent a lot. In some instances, trees represent the wondrousness of nature. Sometimes the tree represents life itself. And I'm a Baptist girl, and so in this sanctuary, when I think about a tree, I think about the song that goes, just like a tree planted by the water, I shall not be moved. As I was preparing for today, and I thought about the tree on the flyer, I said to myself, I wonder what the oldest tree in the world is. And what I found is that there is a tree named Methuselah. It is located in the ancient bristlecone pine forest in the Inyo National Forest and what we now know as California. Based on ring data, at the time that this article was written, that tree was 4,853 years old. Older than this nation for sure, but also well established by the time the pyramids were built. After seeing that there was a tree that was nearly 5,000 years old, I asked myself, how does a tree grow for that long? The answer was that it faced harsh conditions for thousands of years and toughened up. According to the Conservationist Society, trees like Methuselah grow at the uppermost edge of the timberline, among the windswept peaks of California, Nevada, and Utah. Their ability to thrive in this unforgiving landscape of freezing temperatures, arid soils, and relentless winds is the key to their remarkable longevity. They draw sustenance from the most brittle layers of limestone and carbonate rock, and their gnarled, twisted branches, which are shaped by fast-moving currents of mountain air, provide stability and reduce the risk of breakage during storms. Uniquely, these trees' roots provide nourishment only to the specific section of the branches directly above it. This ensures that if a root dies off due to exposure, only the corresponding segment is affected, allowing the rest of the tree to continue to grow. So here's what I took from my little geology lesson. Number one, from the tree line, I learned stand tall, even when winds are fierce and cold. From the soil, I learned stand firm, even when the ground is rocky, and even where there is not abundance. From the branches, I learned be creative, curve and twist as necessary, even when others cannot see the beauty in that. And from the roots, I learned be strategic. Never concede the war when you have only lost a battle. Hold one another up, even when others think that you are doomed. Right now, many of you are overwhelmed by the many changes being thrown at our communities. If you're paying attention to the news or even just social media, perhaps it feels like you can't even catch your breath before a new crisis arises. For you to be here with us today at Justice Day, though, is you saying, despite all of that, you want to be rooted, and you want our communities to thrive. You want to stand tall, even when speaking with lawmakers who trivialize your struggles, rising above apathy and meeting their gazes with courageousness and honesty. You want to work with one another and draw what you can from the soil, even when the terrain is fraught with obstacles. You want to be prepared to pivot and imaginative when someone tells you no, because they're going to tell you no, right? When they tell you that your dreams are too big for your children, that your dreams are too big for their children. And you want to look to your left and your right at your co-laborers and assure them that you will not only care for them, but you will also hold them accountable. That even like those roots, when one of us falters, we will find a way to save the others. You're going to learn a lot today. There are panels and table talks. There are new relationships to build, old relationships to repair, and critical relationships to nurture. Regardless of what you are concerned about, whether it's young people being caught up in the criminal legal system, gun violence, intellectually disabled people facing the death penalty, community members returning home from prisons, or those languishing in jails without due process, you must be rooted in justice and stand firm. And the question of thriving is really one of faith. And despite us being in a sanctuary, I don't mean faith in the religion sense. I mean the belief that we can and we will win because we have no other viable options. that we can thrive even when the picture of that does not look like what we once imagined, that we can do what we do when we decide to do it together. So in closing, I just wanted to say that just as though there are no disposable leaves on a tree, despite some of them being swept away by wind and storms, there are no disposable human beings. Just as every branch is meant to hold something up, every embrace that we share is meant to hold someone up. We are at a critical moment. Just as trees like Methuselah have braved wildfires, we can forge through the fire this time. We have what we need, if only we embrace that truth, from standing tall, finding goodness, creatively twisting, and meeting our collective needs. We can come out on the other side. We will come out on the other side, not just like trees planted by the water, but like trees like Methuselah on mountaintops battered by winds and cold. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Tiffany. My name is Isabel Otero. I am the Georgia Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center. As Tiffany reminds us of the theme of today, I'm going to invite you all to participate in a collective art project that we've put together. So I am the daughter of a kindergarten teacher. I grew up in Ringgold, Georgia, which is a teeny tiny town northwest of here. It's currently Marjorie Taylor Greene country, so you can imagine what that meant as I was growing up. And I used to, go with my mom to her school periodically and participate in these like joyful little moments at her school. And I've learned that as I do this work, we have to find some joy. We have to make sure that we're working together to create beautiful things. Because this work is really, really difficult, right? Yesterday, I spent the day arguing with members of the Public Safety Committee about how the 8th Amendment of the US Constitution is not optional, even if you do not like transgender people, right? You cannot just force them to detransition. You cannot force bad medical things to happen to someone because you dislike them or you don't approve of them or you don't understand them. And then I got to spend the day with my mom building our little tree downstairs. I don't know if you've noticed it. It's not perfect, just like this movement is not perfect. It requires us to tender to it, to care for it. We are all going to be going downstairs and putting our leaves, our dreams, our hopes, our intention, right, of what we want from the building across the street, what we want from those people that say that they represent us. And we're gonna make this tree beautiful, thriving, with all kinds of different leaves, all kinds of different ideas, because it's important for us to sort of say what we want and have some visual of this beautiful movement that folks are creating and are participating in. And so as we go downstairs, as you learn today, as you think of things that you want to see, put them on our tree, right? We are rooted in justice. We are thriving together. We are trying to make sure that we have a visual representation of that hope. And we're hoping that all of you are able to participate in that. If not, I will come find you. I have some of my friends here. We will come get you so you can participate in the tree. My mom it happens to be legally blind, so she's got a condition where she can only see a little bit, but she still helped me build that tree, and she asked me today to send her a picture. She's taking care of my daughter, having a great time with her, trying to worry about stairs and other things because, again, she's disabled. But she is hoping to see this beautiful tree that we're going to create today together. And I'm really excited to help everybody participate and help us be reminded of this theme and this very powerful visual of the tree. And I don't know if my grandmother used to tell me that some of these trees that Tiffany talked about are called mother trees. And I looked this up. This is true. Trees will help each other through underground root systems and fungi and other things, so that if one of them is faltering, there are nutrients and information and all kinds of things sent to that tree that's faltering to help it. And so this is our tree, this is our moment. We're going to create something beautiful together and share it. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to sort of bring my creative energy to something like this and help folks have a visual of what this all means to us. So thank you all very much. I really hope you're able to add your leaves to our tree. They're downstairs. There's some instruction and some information, and I'll help folks find it. So if you see me, just come find me. But thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy your day.
Good morning. I'm Ann Colleton. I'm the Policy and Outreach Coordinator at the Georgia Justice Project. So as our panelists come forward, they're going to be talking about criminal legal reform legislation that is pending. So there's about 2,000 bills that get introduced every year in Georgia. Only 200 of them pass. So you might say, well, how come they're not talking about this one or that one? And we picked about a dozen bills that are actionable today that are moving, whether for good or for bad, that we can take action on today. And so I encourage you to take this handout out of your packet, and it has all the bills outlined, the bill number, what it does, talking points, where it is in the committee. And as the panelists are talking, I encourage you to think about, well, which one or two bills really speak to you that you're passionate about? And then after they're done, we're going to have a role play. Two people are going to come up and do a practice role play, like what it is like to talk to a lawmaker. And then we will have a group of Capitol captains come up, and you can follow them downstairs, and they will help guide you to go talk to lawmakers about these particular bills. So again, take this out, take notes on it, thinking about which are the bills that speak to you the most. Just have one. Is this still working? Okay. So we might just have one microphone. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go in the order of the handout just to make it easy. So we're going to start with Wade, my colleague at Georgia Justice Project, to talk about a few bills that we're working on.
Morning. Hi, everyone. I'm Wade Askew. I'm an attorney, and I'm the policy director at Georgia Justice Project. So very grateful to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share about some of what we're up to this legislative session, and I'm honored to be here with colleagues and friends who are doing so much other great work as we all kind of work together to represent that tree that Tiffany so beautifully articulated and Isabel is so nicely creating that visual for alongside all of us. So I want to talk briefly about a couple of the bills that we're working on this year. As I think most of you know, at Georgia Justice Project, we focus on affirmative legislation. So we write and put out legislation that we see is needed to respond to the needs of folks who are touched by the criminal legal system, who we serve every single day. So what I'm not going to spend much time talking about, where you can go to gjp.org/advocacy to learn more about, are a couple bills that you've heard us talk about before. So one is HB 162. That is a bill that has already crossed over. It passed the House unanimously last week, I think. Things are dog ears during the legislative session, so I think it was last week. Don't hold me to it. That essentially would ensure that if you are sentenced under the First Offender Act, your case is sealed at sentencing and remains sealed from public view permanently as long as you are successful with your First Offender Act sentence. You can check that out, but its next step is going over to the Senate and going through the process in the Senate. Second thing I'm not going to really talk about much today is SB 207. A lot of you have heard us talk about that a lot. That is occupational licensing reform as well as record restriction reform. It's a brief, tight little 95-page bill if you want some good bedtime reading tonight. But that is on its way to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Being perfectly transparent, the Senate part of the process for that bill is not what keeps me up at night. Lieutenant Governor is a big supporter of it. The author of it chairs the committee it's being heard in. And it has a lot of very prominent senators signed on to it. The adventure starts when we cross over to the House. A lot of you know last year it passed actually both the Senate and the House, but there were two slightly different versions. When that happens, they have to agree to the same version, and it ran out of time before they could agree on it. So we're back at it again this year. What I'll spend the rest of my time talking about, though, is a bill that will be going to a hearing for the very first time tomorrow, the Judiciary Non-Civil Subcommittee in the House, and we are calling it the Survivor Justice Act. We are taking that on in partnership with the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And in talking about it, the first thing I want to acknowledge is the reality that pretty much everybody in prison has experienced severe trauma before entering those doors, and only experiences more when they get there. And so we know that this bill is not the end-all be-all when it comes to recognizing trauma in our criminal legal system. We see it as a start. And so what it focuses on is survivors of domestic violence, who very often are pulled into the criminal legal system as defendants and serve very long sentences for taking actions that were needed for their own survival. And so we know that 74 to 95% of women in prison today have experienced physical or sexual abuse in their life. That's astronomical and that's unacceptable. People are being looked at as, and the author of this bill is Chairman Stan Gunter. He's a former judge and a former prosecutor, and he articulated it well to us when he decided he wanted to take this on. He said, when I was a prosecutor, there were too many line prosecutors who saw this situation and looked at an individual and said criminal when they should have said victim. That's what we are trying to solve for. And so we have a kind of three-tiered approach. I won't get into the weeds, but essentially, there are other states that have taken this on and they've focused on resentencing to say folks who are serving long prison sentences, we need a way for them to come home, not serve these egregious sentences. We have that. We also think, though, we shouldn't wait until someone is actually in prison. They shouldn't go to prison in the first place. And so what we're doing is looking at a couple of defenses, updating our criminal code to better account for the dynamics of domestic violence, to prevent that conviction from ever happening in the first place. And if a conviction does happen, to have at sentencing significant sentence mitigation language that has teeth to it to ensure that people are not serving these egregiously long sentences if they do, unfortunately, end up with a conviction. So in a nutshell, that is what that bill does. Would love to talk more about it, but I also want to hear about all the other great things that we've got going on today. So thank you.
All right, next up is Blake Feldman at the Southern Center talking about the death penalty intellectual disability bill.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Blake Feldman. I'm Senior Policy Counsel at the Southern Center, and I'm going to talk to you about why we need your support for House Bill 123. Isabel just mentioned that the Eighth Amendment is not optional. It is very settled law that it violates the Eighth Amendment to execute someone with intellectual disabilities. The Supreme Court has held, everyone agrees, but Georgia places people with intellectual disabilities at the greatest risk of execution, more so than any other state, and it does that for two reasons. One is the standard of proof. If you have intellectual disability, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you have that in order to be spared the death penalty. No other state requires you to reach that standard of proof. So House Bill 123 would change that to preponderance of the evidence. The other important thing is in Georgia right now, if you want to raise a claim that you have intellectual disability, therefore you cannot be put to death, you make that argument to the jury for them to decide at the same time that they are deciding whether you're guilty or not. No other state does it that way. It's incredibly difficult for the jury to do that. It's very unfair for those issues to be mushed together in that way. It's very inefficient. There's lots of reasons why we should not be doing it this way. And what House Bill 123 does is it separates that determination of intellectual disability from the determination of guilt. Because it's not a guilt or innocence issue, it's a sentencing issue. If you are found guilty of the capital crime, but you have intellectual disability, you get life in prison. It's a sentencing issue. It's not a guilt or innocence issue. So separating them is what makes sense. And House Bill 123 does what is necessary to bring Georgia in line with other states so that we stop really having this unacceptable risk that we are executing people with intellectual disability.
Next is Graham Younger, and from GACTL, the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and he's going to talk about two rather technical, legally technical bills, but I'm hoping you can break it down to like what this means for everyday people and how, as a citizen, they can help support these bills.
Absolutely. My name is Graham Younger, again from GACTL, the largest member-funded criminal defense lawyers association in the U.S. And yes, I have 3 minutes to talk about 2 Supreme Court decisions, so I'll go as quickly as I can. The first, and this may sound incorrect to you because it sounded incorrect to me, there is no expectation of privacy with attorney-client communications on carceral phone calls. I see some of your faces. I had that same face. That does not sound right. And essentially, the Burns case that we are talking about here that made that decision essentially was calling on the legislature to act and say exactly this. The Burns case itself is essentially going to, by overruling the Burns case here with HB 460, we will flip that completely. As GACTL lawyers pointed out, this is exactly what everyone needs to happen. Sheriffs and chiefs of police would also probably prefer that instead of making in-person meetings with their clients, there is the expectation that if you call them on the phone, that will be a fine way for you to communicate, and that won't be something that could later be used in court against you. That bill has already worked its way through committee, and this will be the case with the second bill I talk about as well. So the ask today would be to start pressuring the Rules Committee to make sure to bring that up for a vote for the entire House of Representatives. The second bill here, House Bill 176 here, would fix the appeals process for out-of-time appeals. That is also a longer case, but essentially for many years there was sort of an understood policy with years of precedent behind it that you were allowed an out-of-time appeal. Essentially, you were allowed an out-of-time appeal for the vast majority of the cases that you would have there. The Supreme Court said if the legislature wants to do this, they're going to have to put it in writing, and House Bill 176 would fix that appeal process, make it code completely, and be able to have essentially defendants get that ability to make an appeal that they've had for many years, and now just have it specifically written into the Georgia Code. Again, I think that case very specifically said if the legislature wants to do this, it's the role of lawmakers to write this into the code. So again, both of those have already passed out of committee. If you wanted to talk about that one in particular today, the ask would be for it to be put on the Rules Committee calendar so that it can now be passed by the entire House of Representatives.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ray Kalfani from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, and he's going to talk about 2 different bills, but both are related to fines and fees and how the use of fines and fees extracts wealth from low-income communities to fund governments and not for public safety.
Yes. So I can certainly talk about them and highlight them individually, but as Ann mentioned, I want to just talk about that collective theme about, right now, we're in session, we've got a pivotal opportunity to address, excessive fines and fees practice in our courts, by our local police, as well as even our, speeding camera enforcement systems. And, we've got a number of communities in Georgia, we've got dozens of communities in Georgia that, rely on, these excessive practices that are profit-driven and place, profit over public safety, which, way too often takes wealth out of poor communities and robs them of opportunities to have economic mobility and economic opportunity. So the few bills I'll talk about, that if passed, can reduce the likelihood that our criminal legal system is turned into an armed debt collector. That, as I said, seeks profit over public safety. And one of those bills is House Bill 140. And it's a bill that'll do basically two things. It'll add safeguards to protect against excessive enforcement of speeding offenses, as well as non-speeding offenses, like getting pulled over and ticketed for a broken tail light or for having lapsed insurance. But it also provides safeguards against failed court practices that say, that force people to pay fines and fees whether they get due process or not. The other set of bills, and these are the bills around speeding cameras in school zones, which are House Bill 225 and Senate Bill 172. Both of these bills would stop a mass expansion of the use of speeding camera enforcement in school zones, which basically do three things. They take wealth out of poor communities, they transfer it to speeding camera companies and law enforcement, and they do so without adequately addressing people's concerns in terms of child safety in school zones. So, when people experience this type of stuff every day, some people experience them one at a time. You can get a speeding ticket or a ticket for, like I said, a broken tail light or for a lapse registration or lapse insurance. And if you can't pay that ticket quickly, you can be put on probation in this state. Or a situation where you can be in court and a judge will say to you, they'll decide whether you have your freedom based on if you have enough money to pay on your court debt. Or a speeding camera situation where you can get a ticket from a speeding camera in a school zone weeks after the offense, not know that that you even did that until weeks afterward, and then have to pay a ticket and decide whether you're paying for basic necessities or having to pay this speeding ticket, this school zone speeding ticket, and choose between basic necessities or paying that ticket to avoid having your car registration withheld. So these type of things can happen one by one, but all the time, too often they happen on top of each other, because a lot of times the same cities that rely upon excessive enforcement of like speeding offenses and non-speeding offenses that aren't in like school zones also have these school zone speeding cameras on top of that. So way too often people could experience all this all together, and it can just be compounded on top of each other, which is is compounded debt, compounded pressure to try to avoid entanglement in the criminal legal system, and just other compounded consequences that can certainly lead to possible incarceration. I'll stop there.
All right, and now I'm not exactly sure who's talking about the next two bills, but they're about young people and how they potentially can get caught up in the system if these two bills pass. So, sorry, Isabel.
No
Isabel
worries.
Otero from
Yes.
the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Hi, everybody, again. So yes, I am going to be talking about the school discipline bill. If you all may recall, there was a really tragic incident up in Barrow County in Winder, Georgia at Appalachian High School last year, where there was an active shooter at that school. There were, it's just exactly as you would expect. And I think we are a little bit desensitized to these issues because they happen so often. And so as a result, the Speaker of the House, John Burns, has decided to take this issue on, right? But rather than addressing mass shootings in a way where you go after things like gun reform, mental health, and other issues that would actually produce the kind of school safety that we would all like to see for our kids, they are going in a slightly different direction, where they are criminalizing or further criminalizing youth in a couple of different ways. And so I will talk about SB 268, and I think Graham will talk about SB 61. They're sort of similar bills. One is in the House. SB 268 is a pretty comprehensive measure that tries to address all kinds of issues around behavioral threat assessments, around a management system where the Georgia emergency management people are talking to schools about how do you deal with school safety, which is not their job, right? There are some positive things in this bill around mental health support and resources for students, but those are sort of buried beneath a bunch of information and a bunch of new processes that are not entirely clear and can cause a lot of issues for due process for students who might be expelled, for students who might have a true disciplinary issue, but that issue is not a school safety concern, right? If that student needs actual support and resources, that student should not be placed on some list and prevented from even entering a school, right, if they are transferring from one to the other. So there are some real big concerns about this bill. We've tried to work on the House side on some amendments and some things to sort of clarify who can report on these children. What does the due process look like for a kid who has to fight to stay in school, right? Because we know that unfortunately in a state like Georgia, about 38% of all Georgia students are Black, but more than 50% of them are the ones experiencing school expulsions. They are the ones experiencing issues in the criminal legal system. They're the ones pushed out of schools more often, right? And so we are essentially building a bad school safety system on top of an already terrible system for kids who are experiencing the criminal legal system because of the school to prison pipeline. And so it's really important for us to get information to your to your loved ones, about your loved ones who have kids in school, grandkids who themselves are still maybe in school, about what it is that you actually want to see in a school safety bill, right? Because criminalizing youth, putting them on lists, having people anonymously report them, right, is just going to lead to additional criminalization of especially Black and brown youth, and not to additional school safety, right? If you want gun measures, if you want reforms, you need to go and talk to the House. You need to go and talk to folks who are your current state representatives and talk to them about how you want school safety to look, because this bill, HB 268, is not currently in a state where we can say, this is good, let's do this, right? There's some, like I said, there's some positive things, but there are some things that are really concerning us. And I will do my best to get some information online to you all, so when you click on all the links for Justice Day, you'll be able to address it. But some of us have ran out of time before things happen because we're here every day, and so it was a little bit difficult for me to get you a leave behind document, but please do find me and our team happy to talk to you more about this bill. But what's most important is that you come to your state representative and you talk to them about what school safety actually means for you and your kids, because that's what they should be fighting for, right? Not additional criminalization measures.
Thank you. And I'll talk briefly about Senate Bill 61. Again, an entirely too expansive bill that has the potential for 13-year-olds to be prosecuted as adults for saying things that, while I might not be comfortable saying them in a house of worship, are not much worse than, hey, I'm going to come back and beat all of you up. The kind of things that you can see kids saying, this is entirely, this is a sledgehammer for something that could be caused with school discipline that takes place within the school system completely. We offered some amendments to the people behind this bill, and we're not able to move forward those at all. The one other thing I'd like to say about this one is the fact that these two are sort of married together here in the document. I don't want us to fall into a trap of, well, here's one that has some good pieces in it, but there is everything that Isabel just talked about, and Senate Bill 61, well, that's the bad one. Both of these bills need the negative attention of, these are not the way forward. So again, I think everything is on the page in terms of how dangerous Senate Bill 61 is, but don't think of this as a lesser of two evils approach. Think of this as two bills that both need your attention and need to be defeated here.
Great. And the last bill that we identified for action today is Senate Bill 7, and Blake, I believe, is going to talk about that. And then Coco, I promise I won't forget you.
I'll be very brief. So Senate Bill 7 has passed out of committee. So now it is up for whether it will go before the full Senate or not before crossover day. But what it does is it's a very short bill, authored and sponsored by senators who are not from Atlanta. that would require the city of Atlanta to allow the Fulton County Sheriff to use the Atlanta City Detention Center to incarcerate people. We oppose this because, as most people know, the Fulton County Sheriff's Department is under federal oversight right now, and the jail. There's a consent decree after an extensive DOJ investigation. The Fulton County Jail, which is operated by the sheriff, is not safe. It's unsanitary. There's constitutional violations. There are a lot of issues. One of the root issues, or an issue that contributed to all of the others, is the lack of adequate staffing and supervision. Giving this sheriff's department, without any additional personnel or addressing any of these other issues, a shiny new jail will not solve the problem. It's not a serious policy solution. And also, just frankly, if a state senator from outside of Fulton County, from outside of the city of Atlanta, has an opinion about how the city of Atlanta should use its building, they should sign up for public comment at city council, because it's not the state's business.
And now we'll hear from Coco Guthrie Pappy, who is at the Deep Center in Savannah, talking about a couple bills that we don't have on our list today, but are still very relevant.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about one bill that is on the back of your sheet that has already crossed over, and then I'm going to reference a bill that Isabel also brought up this morning that is not on this sheet, but was introduced late last week and is moving very quickly, and you'll probably see why. So the first bill I want to talk about is SB 21. The simple version is it strips sovereign immunity from elected officials who do not comply with ICE. What is sovereign immunity? So if something happens and I'm like, hey, I'm mad, I want to bring a lawsuit against, the mayor of where I live. I'm not actually suing the mayor, I'm suing the government that the mayor represents, right? So an example of how this law would play out, I'm just going to use, the city of Savannah where I live. So our mayor, Mayor Van Johnson, has said the city of Savannah is not using any of its time or resources or energy to comply with ICE. Deal with it. That's his exact quote, which is why I like him. And so what this law would do is it would strip, because he is saying, I am not complying, the state would strip his sovereign immunity as an elected official, and that means that any random schmo could go and sue him as an individual for this decision, right? So this is dangerous on lots of levels, right? Frankly, it's almost a little bit too extreme. I'm are we really willing to open this can of worms? All right. But ultimately, what this is a pressure tactic to ensure that local elected officials who are saying, I'm not getting involved with this, this is not about me and my resources, we're not playing this game. It's to punish those folks and pressure them into complying with ICE, which no, right? So yeah, SB 21, it's already crossed over. It is currently in the House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, which means Clint Crow is who you would need to talk to. He is the chair of that committee. And again, we don't have any information on when it's going to be heard next, but it could be probably after crossover. So the second bill, which is not on this sheet that I would love to bring up, that again, Isabel sort of flagged this morning when she introduced today, is SB 185. Man, oh man, is this a problematic bill. So what this does is it bans the state from using any resources to pay for trans folks who are currently incarcerated for their health care. So no gender affirming care, no hormone therapy. There was a really concerning thing that the sponsor of the bill mentioned yesterday where he was like, I don't want the state to pay for BBLs, which made me deeply uncomfortable. It probably makes you deeply uncomfortable. We could probably all agree to that. But other than completely violating the Eighth Amendment as was brought up, it's just, it's cruelty is the point, right? It just really is cruelty is the point. Constitutional violation just a really bad bill. It has not passed out of committee yet. It had its first hearing yesterday. It looks like it was recommended for due pass, so that means like the next hearing will likely see it go out of committee. So one of the best things you can do is talk with Senator John Albers, who is the chair of Public Safety, and tell him that like this bill is a really bad idea. And it's just like, it's pointless cruelty, right? Like so much of this is pointless cruelty, but this bill is like really pointless cruelty to be denying people health care, so.
Sure. Okay, so we have a question. Who would like to answer what is crossover?
I'm happy to answer. So the legislative process is a little bit complicated, as you all have a very handy little sheet here. So crossover day is not the halfway point of the legislature, but it's towards the end of the legislature. It's usually day 28, I believe. We in Georgia have 40 legislative days, so they don't have to use them in order. They can take all year if they want to use these 40 legislative days. But by day 28, it's our first major deadline for things to go from one chamber to the other, to start the process again, to be able to be passed during this legislative session. And so our legislative session ends this year on April the 4th, and on March 6th, that is crossover day. And so that's a very, very long day that we all end up here until like midnight because they use the entirety of the day to try to pass as many bills out of one chamber to the other and do a lot of backdoor negotiations and quiet negotiations about what kind of things they're willing to move from one chamber to the other because they know that that is a big deadline. And so that is the day that we'll know, right, when most of the bad bills have crossed over to be heard in the other chamber. So if there's a bill in the House, it has to pass out of the House before it goes to the Senate by March 6th. If there's a bill in the Senate, it has to pass out of the Senate, the full Senate, right? Get a vote by every senator in order to make it to the House to be heard. And as the handy little chart says, the process sort of starts over, right? And so it'll go back through committee, it'll go back through the Rules Committee, and then it'll be heard on the floor of the chamber that it's in. So right now, when you go and listen to the legislature, you'll hear them mostly talking about bills in their chamber. For very few exceptions, things like budgets and stuff like that sometimes get talked about before crossover day, but it's unlikely that you'll see any House bills be heard in the Senate until after crossover and any Senate bills in the House until after crossover. So that's one of our big major deadlines. It does not mean that they cannot grab the language of a bad bill and stick it somewhere else in an amendment, but it is far less likely that that happens. And if that does happen, those of us up here, several of the other advocates in the room, will make sure to flag that for the community so that you know this bill that used to be about licenses or about license plates or tennis or pickleball sometimes is actually now a bill about incarcerating youth or whatever it is, right? And so we will flag that for you. So it doesn't mean that it's the deadline where we can all take a really deep breath, but it's at least a major deadline that gives us a lot of information about the legislature.
Sure.
So it's my understanding that Senator Kim Jackson brought the bill a week or two ago that is similar to House Bill 123. Do y'all have any information about where that is in the process?
So it has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee, but the Senate Judiciary Committee has not placed it on their agenda. It would be great if we had a hearing on that also, because it really is a companion bill. But I think like as we approach crossover day, House Bill 123 has made it out of committee. The best chance of keeping this alive, this policy, is by advocating for House Bill 123 to pass the House, and then working with our great friend, Senator Jackson, to push it forward through the Senate also. Thank you.
So yeah, I think we have like 5 more minutes, so we can take a couple more questions.
Is the bill HB 225 and SB 172, is it tied to the bill that's been talked about this week about passing school buses? How does that, have you heard about that, or the
Yeah, she was mentioning that there's another bill in terms of like penalties that come with passing a school bus. I mean, they certainly are in kind of like the same theme of things. I personally don't believe that, giving somebody $1,000 penalty for passing a school, that's a little excessive to me. Certainly there needs to be a consequence for that. But, $1,000 for anybody in this room is quite a bit of money. But all in all, I want to thank you for asking the question. There is a real concern about child safety in school zones that needs to be addressed. There needs to be some additional things with those bills that are added to make sure, to say it in short, that we're addressing this issue before it happens rather than penalizing somebody weeks after an offense, right? So I'm happy to talk more in detail about that, as we get off of this. But, that's the crux of it. We need to be dealing with this issue to make sure people don't do it at all or very, very rarely at all, rather than still having something that's still going to have people speed through school zones or speed past school buses and penalize them way after in ways that don't truly stop the issue.
Another question?
I have a question for Graham about HB 460, the attorney-client privilege. So just a kind of clarification. So is it true that there is privilege if the attorney and client speak in person? So that's true. It's just if they speak on the phone, it's not.
Yes, right now, and I didn't get too far into it, but essentially there was another bill called House Bill 354 that would have just gone to the privilege argument. This one goes to directly whether the call will be recorded at all, which is something that sort of through discussions, they started talking to more sheriffs, essentially, who said, we actually, and this is in some ways maybe more frustrating, we have the ability to just have an unrecorded phone call that they will be able to allow not to record anything in the first place so that you don't have to worry about that privilege piece. But yes, essentially, it's exactly how you just phrased it. The conversation itself is not going to be privileged. Now it will be.
What about phones in the prison? Sometimes you communicate from...
Yes, that's a little bit, I think, of what I was trying to get to, is they have the ability to offer those phones within the prison that don't record anything. Yes.
We might have time for one more question, and then we're going to have a role play. Two people will come up and give a sample conversation about a bill with a lawmaker. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So the facility that my fiance is at, actually the warden will force him to go into a room where all of the administrative wardens can listen to his conversation, and we've tried, and the lawyer has tried to force them to allow him to go to a more private room. If that law takes effect, what is, how could an inmate?
I think this one is specifically going to go to the phone calls piece in particular. That situation, maybe we could follow up after this. That will not be in terms of House Bill 460. We could have a longer conversation about. But he cannot have it in a room, and the room is where there are wardens around him as he's speaking. Okay. That might be something for us to take offline here, but I can follow back up here in a second.
All right, we'll do another one.
Just a question on HB 582, the survivor justice. Will that allow those that have been incarcerated for domestic violence to go back and review their case according to this bill, or is it just to those going forward?
Yes, so it
The question
applies.
was about the Survivor Justice Act, and
Yes,
would it
thank you.
help someone who's already incarcerated go back to reconsider their sentence?
That's right. So it applies both moving forward, so trying to prevent the conviction from happening. If a conviction does happen, mitigate the sentence with real teeth. So it's not just, oh, this is a factor to considering sentencing. No, we are actually changing the maximum sentence. We are departing from mandatory minimums. We are literally changing what you can be sentenced to. For people who are in prison right now, there is now a path going to be, if this bill passes in its current form, there would be a path back into court to say, had this law existed when I went through the system, my sentence would have been very, very different, if at all. And so there are a couple of paths for people back into court in that situation. to be able to say, this applies to me, my sentence needs to change, I need to go home.
All right, well, thank you to all the panelists. And now Dominique Harris and Rosalind Calhoun are going to do a sample role play talking about a piece of legislation. This is a model. There's a handout in your materials about kind of how you talk to a lawmaker, you know. Talk from your own experience. Don't cover too much. Just kind of give them a few pieces of information. Leave behind some handout. But this is kind of a live example of the handout, let's just say. And Dominique is the Justice Day attendee, and Rosalind is the lawmaker.
How y'all doing? How you doing?
Come in.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Dominique Harris, and I'm just trying to get your opinion and hopefully support on a bill. It's basically a bill that get Georgians back to work. It's State Bill 207. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of that bill.
So what are your thoughts on that bill?
Well, one of the things that I know is you all are trying to get someone on your side to be able to be backing this bill. And I know for sure you are about to ask me. You are not the first one who's come in. I have already expressed I have already expressed to them that I am behind you 100%. But just to be honest, I can't hold that bill for you. But if you can possibly get a Republican on your team, we can probably do this together.
Yes, ma'am. I totally agree because this is not a partisan bill. This is a bill that gets all Georgians back to work. So do you have any Republicans in mind or that you think I can talk to or just present some language to? Because we have a one-pager. We have a lot of data based on how employing formerly incarcerated individuals and how all these numbers based on 1 out of 4 jobs require a licensing, and it's actually a public safety help instead of, it basically reduces recidivism. So do you have any Republicans that we can present this data to?
Well, I can tell you there is one, but the way our process works, you're going to have to let me get in front of them and introduce it to them so that I can get them on my side, because you know sometimes the Republicans don't want to bend, especially when it comes to reducing recidivism, when they see that mostly, you know, they don't want to open the doors. But I will do my part. Like I did tell the other young man who had came in, and I told him 100%, I'm going to do my part to get behind it. So I am going to allow you to reach out to me directly. And reach out to me, and I will give you all the information, and we'll work on this together.
All right, thank you very much. They might shake their hand, they might not. Okay, so that would have been perfect. That's the perfect one. Not so perfect one, right? Hey, how you doing? My name is Dominique Harris, and I'm just here to ask you for your support.
Okay, hold on, I'm sorry. Did you make an appointment with my assistant?
No, ma'am. There wasn't. Your secretary
Okay,
wasn't.
wait, so you just knocked on the door?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here, so can I just have your time
2
if
minutes.
that's okay? That's all I need, ma'am.
30 seconds, go.
Okay, so this bill gets Georgians back to work. We all care about recidivism and public safety. I have numbers to show you that employing and allowing someone to attain their occupational licenses actually supports public safety. We as Americans in this community of America, we want to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? So going back to school for 4 years and potentially getting my heating and air
Okay,
certificate.
wait a minute, are you talking about them people in prison?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here we go. Listen, I understand y'all folks is in prison and y'all want to get out. I do. But see, there's some ways we got to go about this. And first of all, you're knocking on my door. It's not one.
I understand that.
So what I'm going to suggest to you is make an appointment. I promise I will listen to you. I promise I will hear everything you have to say if you just go through those proper channels. I will listen to you. And I might be a little hard. You know, I understand the population of, you know, the prison system. And I do know we do need to do better. but you got to do better and make an appointment.
Thank you, man. Now, that's all we really got, and it might be a lot of different situations. It might be a lot of different personalities. There's no black and white with people, but we just wanted to give y'all that it is relational, like it is conversational. You don't have to be afraid, like this is your representative. I didn't get to the word I wanted to use, and that's constituent. We're their constituent, it's supposed to be. They work for us. We always have to remember that is the relationship, that they work for us. They kind of gotta listen. So, and if I have to put that an appointment in, yeah, you gonna listen for real now. So just remember that. And that's all we got, and hopefully that was helpful.
Right, that was perfect. So if a situation like that happens, right? So today is not a legislative day, meaning the lawmakers are not in their chambers voting. And so if you've come other years when you go to the ropes and you call people out, that is not what is happening today because they're not in the chambers. Means, I think, a little less crowded, so we might actually have more opportunities to speak to lawmakers, but the captains that will be introduced soon will take you to help you know where the lawmakers' offices are, and you will go speak to them or their staff. So you might just speak to a staff member, that's totally fine. They can pass on the information. If somebody isn't there or they don't have time, like Dominique encountered, you can still leave behind a one-pager. Most of these bills have a one-pager, so you can leave that behind. And then also, when you checked in, you got these lobby letters, which will allow you to write your own information. Like if you're a little shy in talking and rather just leave a note, you can do that here. You list the bill number, whether you support or oppose it, your name, contact information, and why you support or why you oppose the bill. So if you encounter someone like Dominique did, you still have options to write them a note and or leave them the one-pager. So please do that. And then Dominique is going to help. The other Dominique, the other fabulous Dominique is going to help with, so remember, think about which of the bills that you heard about you're most interested in, and then we're going to have some captains that you'll meet downstairs to guide you across the street. Sorry. And one more thing, if you're like, I'm still not sure I want to go across the street, I don't want to walk that far, I don't want to wait in line, there will be opportunities downstairs to write these lobby letters, and we will deliver them for you after a couple more speakers. And then, or if you're still not sure, but then the next panel riles you up and says, yes, I can do this, you'll have an opportunity to go later. But if you're all ready to go, we'll have teams ready to take you across the street now.
Hey family, super excited about today. That role play was fire, right? Because it happens like that. So today we're gonna have a few different teams. All of our captains will be downstairs. Oh, sorry. Hey y'all, Dominique Grant, Campaign and Operations Manager with Women on the Rise, Georgia. So all of our captains will be downstairs. They'll have a sign that looks like this. I'm just gonna briefly go over the bills and who you'll be looking for. So if you are interested in the school discipline bills, which is SB 61 and HB 268, that will be Coco and Amy. Are Coco and Amy in here? Okay, they might be down. Oh, Amy's back there. You want them to meet you downstairs? Okay, so Amy is back there, but you'll meet her downstairs. Rosalind and Cynthia will be handling confidential prison communication. That's HB 460 and HB 176, which is the appeals bill. And Rosalind is who just did that lovely role play. She is back there. Shaniqua will be covering municipal jail use by the sheriff, which is SB 7. Shaniqua is right there with the Black Voters Matter shirt on. I will be covering the Survivor Justice Act, which is HB 582. By the way, Wednesday is a big day for this bill, so if you are interested, please, I'll be downstairs. Dominique Harris is going to cover fines and fees, which is HB 140, and the school zone camera bill, which is HB 225. And Dominique Harris, he's right there. That's who was. They're already moving down. He's the other one that did the role play. But all of the people will have signs that have the name of the bill. Thank you. Joey
who is right here, wonderful Joey. Joey will help you with speaking to your lawmaker and how to find your own lawmaker. And Savannah will be covering the death penalty ID bill, which is HB 123. Blake got excited about that. So we are gonna start heading downstairs. If you plan to go to the Capitol, please meet the captain. We have some one-pagers for y'all, talking points, and just tips and opportunities on what it is how you can interact with your lawmaker today. If you're interested in speaking on multiple bills, honestly, you can just pick a team. We're all gonna go across the street, and if you see a captain from another team in the building, you can, But I'm willing to direct everybody there. Also, please make sure if you are planning to go to the Capitol, you have an ID. They will not let you in without identification.
Thanks. Lastly, for those who are not going across to the Capitol and want to stay here for activities, can folks hear me? We'll have some activities for you to engage in. One of the workshops, civic engagement, will not be happening, unfortunately. Our panel was unable to attend today, but we'll have a video that will be shown today that you can watch, and I think you'll be very interested in, about Georgia's involuntary servitude constitutional, I don't know if it's in the Constitution, but the legislation that we are trying to push for in Georgia to end involuntary servitude, and there'll be other activities. But the video will be shown here in the sanctuary, and then please just keep up with the agenda, and again, once you get comfortable, if you do feel like going back over to the Capitol, you'll be able to do that and have an opportunity to do that. But thank you. Thanks for those who are staying over. We're gonna try to get ourselves back on schedule, and we're gonna start with a film about amending the Constitution to end prison slavery. And this is being hosted by All of Us or None Georgia. And so if you take a look, and I think you'll learn some things if you haven't already heard about this campaign. We definitely need you to get involved. It's gonna take all of us to get involved. And let's welcome Walisha Menfee to the stage.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who voted last year, I'm not sure, if you had a Democratic ballot, you may have noticed that one of the issues questioned on the ballot last May that says, as a voter, would you support the ending of prison labor? So that is a great thing. My name is Walisha Wilson Menfee. I am the chapter coordinator of the All of Us or None Georgia chapter. All of Us or None is a national organization mainly composed of currently and formerly incarcerated people, but also as well composed of family members and advocates for the civil rights and human rights of currently incarcerated people and the issues that impact us as well as our families. It is a national organization, and the Atlanta chapter is the only Georgia chapter. We meet monthly on the fourth Thursdays. A lot of the issues that we do support or advocate against are issues that affect us, whether it's solitary confinement, whether it's probation and parole, whether it's fines and fees. But right now we are focusing on one that is very terrible in nature as it connects to our history of slavery, which is prison labor. A lot of people think mistakenly that the 13th Amendment ended slavery in 1865. It did not. It simply evolved slavery. Because in the actual Constitution, it says that there shall not be any slavery in the United States except for the punishment of a crime. So basically what happens was, very short, is slave owners were so used to all of the profit and revenue that came out of the use of slaves They literally panicked. Oh my God, you know, they're gonna end slavery, what are we gonna do? So they basically took that loophole that was in the 13th Amendment and exploited it and started creating laws that targeted black people called the Black Codes, which made it illegal for black people to be unemployed, to spit on the ground, to sell flour, to walk with a cane, just any and every little thing that could, why? Get them convicted, because the loophole says we can keep slaves, but they gotta be convicted. So if you look back over the years as how this has progressed into mass incarceration today, we normally think that when people commit a crime, appropriately, they should be held accountable for what they've done, sort of like bail. But when you are using a system not to hold people accountable and rehabilitate people, but simply to get free slave labor, that is a problem. Currently incarcerated people produce over $12 billion in services. They make cups for Starbucks, they make license plates for the state of Georgia, they make peach passes, they make the furniture from IKEA, they even answer phones in prison from the cell systems for Verizon. These are all services that they are making money, they don't get paid. And so out of the Black Codes came convict leasing. Now, first of all, I want to start off, we want to use humanizing terms when we refer to people. I know we're used to using terms like convict, prisoner, inmate, but we are people. So we are people who are currently incarcerated. We are people on probation and parole. So when you humanize a person, you have less of a tendency to treat them inhumane. And so you turn into convict leasing, and for those of you who don't understand that term, that is me saying, Lucy, I'm gonna sell you Lucy for $15,000 to the city of Atlanta. Lucy's not gonna get paid, but we'll give the city of Atlanta $15,000 if they loan me Lucy for her labor. Lucy doesn't get paid. Lucy doesn't get protections. Lucy can be forced to work out in the heat. Lucy can work on a trash truck and lose her arm. There's no protection whether you die or not. Currently incarcerated people are working as firemen. When they get out, they cannot get jobs as firemen. They're risking their lives. The first time they had the wildfire in California, they called currently incarcerated people to do that. But when you get out, you can't get a job because they say we can't hire you because you have a felony. But you had no problem using me with a felony while I was incarcerated. And out of the $12 billion of services, over $14 billion of wages that should have gone to incarcerated people are stolen from them. And so there are over 4,400 corporations and businesses who use slave labor, who profit off slave labor, and also they lobby to state legislators to keep slavery. And so about 2 years ago, I was a part of a fellowship, Represent Justice, that supports formerly incarcerated people who have passions in their advocacy, but basically wanted to put it in art. And I chose my form of art as film. And the film that you're about to see is a documentary that I created about 2 years ago. It premiered in Hollywood in October 2022. And it talks about how Georgia profits heavily off of slavery. 80% of the folks that you do see impacted by slavery, it's no coincidence that it's black men who are able-bodied. So at any given time, you can see in the state of Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, hundreds of black men working out in a cotton field with dozens of white men on horses with shotguns. Now, if you just think about what chattel slavery was, there were hundreds of black folks in a cotton field with white men on horses with shotguns. It's the same, it's a different year, but it's the same practice of slavery. A lot of people are mistakenly in believing that, well, when you do the crime, you should do the time. People like going to work on those things because it gives them something to do. Anybody would do whatever they could do to get out of an 8x8 cell. When I was sentenced to prison, I was not sentenced to work out on construction. But because I refused to work for free, because somebody was taking care of my kids, I wanted to send money home. I thought you get paid. I was put in solitary confinement. A lot of folks who refuse to work for free are beaten, Their privileges are taken away from them. They're put in solitary confinement. They're raped. They're set up to be raped. They are denied probation and parole. And right now in the state of Georgia, this is how bad it is that they want to keep slavery so bad that they intentionally deny people's parole to keep them in there as slaves. Alabama is just as bad about it. So if you did really good barbering while you were in prison, or you were a good mechanic working on their cars, and you were up for parole, you've been really good, they'll say, no ma'am, he's really good at fixing our cars. We're going to deny their parole. And so this film is going to delve into that. We focused on 3 areas. I interviewed a lot of my friends. One is Lucy, who's going to be, she's featured in the film. Tanika's featured in the film. I went to Atlanta, Jonesboro, and Columbus and spoke with advocates there. Columbus, I'm originally from Columbus, turns out over 650 people a day from the jails and prisons. They work in the courthouses. They're doing the data. They're literally doing everything. And this is a problem because it also contributes to unemployment. You want to know why you can't get that job? Because they're not going to pay you $15 to do it when they can get a slave to do it for free.
The numbers that you quoted, was that in Georgia or in the U.S.?
In the U.S., across the U.S., currently incarcerated people produce over $12 billion in services and goods. And over $14 billion of their wages are stolen because they're not paid. And so this film is going to talk about that. Of course, the mayor called me, and I had to text him and give him a little good piece of my mind. But about 2 years ago, right after COVID, about 3 years ago, he was quoted because in Columbus, they rely heavily on incarcerated people to empty the trash. And due to COVID, and because of reforms that were allowing people to get out of prison, people were upset because their garbage wasn't being picked up. And Mayor Skip Henderson in Columbus quoted that, well, we just got a shortage of prisoners, i.e. slaves. So it kind of really made me hot because now it makes me feel like you are incentivized to get more people in prison to have people to do their trash. And just in case you wanted to know, I want to give you a term before we watch this. I want you all to Google lockup quotas. Lockup quotas, I'm going to tell you what it is. The city of Atlanta participates in lockup quotas. 90% of the private prisons have lockup quotas. So if you create a prison in a city, the prison tells the city, we have 3,000 beds. You have to, at a minimum, supply us with people to keep at least 90% of these beds filled at all times. If not, you will cover the cost of these beds. So of course the prison, the local city and the police, they're not finna foot that bill. So instead of giving you probation because you went into the store to steal a pack of chicken and some diapers, they're gonna opt for prison because they make more money off you incarcerated. So I hope you all enjoy this film. And for those of you who may not see it, says, although this message at this time I made it, Alabama incarcerated laborers did a strike. They said, we're not gonna work anymore. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, Alabama had it on their ballot to end prison slavery. So it says, although this message is to support the ending of slavery in Georgia, I stand in solidarity with the incarcerated workers in Alabama who are currently on strike at the time of this filming. I support them, I hear them, and I stand with them to get the equity, dignity, and respect they deserve. Incarcerated workers in the U.S. produce over $11 billion in goods and services a year. Therefore, I fully support the economic disruption and castration, that means I don't mind a strike, of profit that the state of Alabama will undoubtedly experience during this time. Treat us with dignity, humanity, and respect that we deserve, or we will shut down the economy. All righty, thank you all, and enjoy. And it's about 14 minutes long. Afterwards, we will have just a quick panel discussion for you to ask us some questions. And there will be some resources also in you all's QR code that you'll get. So please make sure you follow up with that. Also, membership into the All of Us or None chapter is free. We meet virtually the last Thursday of each month. It is currently our goal to get it on a legislative session in 2026 to get the state constitution amended. 9 states have already done it. Most recently in November, I think it was Nevada, the last state to get theirs amended, and it is our hope. Surely if Alabama can do it, Georgia should be able to do it as well. Huh? It did. It passed. The voters passed it. It is on YouTube. And also, I think that link is in your QR code resources, but is in QR code. And if you see me out, I'll make sure I give you the link as well. Thank you.
The 13th Amendment bans slavery with the exception of folks who are incarcerated.
Okay.
The 13th Amendment is what empowers the longevity in the process of slavery.
Slavery is abolished except if you've been found guilty of committing the crime. So if you've been found guilty of committing a felony, you no longer are an American citizen. You are now a slave.
And when you call the Department of Corrections, they will tell you in no uncertain terms, check your 13th Amendment. It's legal. You get convicted of a crime, then we can work you.
Prison is a business. It's a business.
Yes.
Whether it pays people or not, it is a booming business in this country.
Incarcerated people provide over $11 billion in services each year. And that is from working in plants, that's making furniture, lingerie, working in call centers, and they're working as garbage collectors. They work as clerks in the courthouse.
The city using laborers to clean the buildings. I see them at the fire department.
Fighting forest fires. They're doing landscaping on the highways, a lot of water treatment plants. They clean up parks and recs.
In the conditions with no heat, in the conditions in the summertime with no air. You know, I mean, the conditions were deplorable.
And the more you look, the more you see. They don't know our Braille translation services happen, our license plates, masterses for our public parks and for our higher education. All the paper products, an enormous amount of things. People really are unaware.
I see them walking around in the government center. Nobody supervising them. They got the striped suits on. They paint. They doing plumbing. They just, that's their job. Okay. But then when they get out, they can't come and wait for the city to get the same job.
People are not going to the factories because they got a new factory called a prison.
Prison slave labor runs Columbus. They had to lay off a whole bunch of workers in order to replace them with prison slave labor.
You know how much money that's saving the system by having people incarcerated do that?
Certainly, folks are being employed, unpaid, to do jobs that other folks could be paid to do, right?
Yes.
And there are a lot of those jobs.
There'll be more jobs available on the outside for people that's not incarcerated, because if you got 100 people working from inside a prison, outside, that's 100 jobs that people that's free can have.
Cannot get that job.
Yeah.
When you go and apply for that job, they say we're not hiring. Why would they pay you $30 an hour when they can get somebody to do it for free? People don't understand. People say, oh, I support incarcerated people's labor, but what they're not understanding is that contributes to unemployment on the outside.
Right.
Myself, I've been in prison before. I was in the federal prison in Estelle, South Carolina, and I only made like $12 a month, but we built forklifts for the military.
And most of these jobs, if not all of them, when they get out, they cannot get jobs with those same positions.
So now you go and try to get employment from the same people who's employed you for free, and you can't work for them. And they say, well, I can't work for you because the state law says you can't work for me if you got a felony. So why doesn't that law apply when I'm incarcerated?
It's legal. This is Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. She said it's legal. And I said, just because it's legal, it doesn't make it right.
If people are working, they deserve to be compensated. And where you are living, whether by choice or by law, doesn't affect the fact that you are doing labor that deserves compensation.
Yes. Are you aware that there are some folks who have actually refused to work and get punished? They get their phone calls and visitation taken from them, or get thrown in solitary when they refuse to work.
That's what I was about to say. In the feds, if you don't work, you go to the hole. It's called a shoe.
So therefore, it's not optional, it's not volunteering.
No, it's mandatory.
So when you're made to work for free, that is slavery. Why is it so sensitive when we hear terms like slavery and don't correlate that with incarcerated people?
The first part comes with us not actually engaging in addressing what this country has done historically and currently, and so people are defensive.
Yeah.
The second part is I think people really don't know. People really have no idea how much labor is done in the state of Georgia through our correction systems.
They knew that you couldn't continue to call people slaves. They said, but people will accept if you call them a criminal.
Basically, it's convict leasing, which is an old thing where they basically say, hey, we talked to a construction worker, the construction worker gonna give us $10,000 a month if we send them 5 convicts. They're gonna pay us $10,000, we're gonna make the 5 convicts go over there to work. The convicts ain't gonna get paid, but we just got paid $10,000.
You utilize them for years while you're in the institution. Again, you're good enough to utilize them while you're in the institution. Those skills are great to assist while you're there. Do those things, make money, push out the numbers you need so that the state looks great. Go out and give them the diplomas, assist them all. But then when you get home, you can't get employed.
Many of these towns, these townships, these little small Hickville locations would not have booming economies if Black bodies were not taken from the inner city and the bond money being moved from the inner city to these little small hick towns and building the prison and building a new high school and building a new housing and building the shopping plaza and building the economy.
The census helps you get parking lots, they help you get accessible, all these different things, and you're telling me you counted me in a county. That's why you see a lot of these prisons in these small, poor counties, rural counties, because that's how they make their money, off your speed tickets and off the prisons. And they're counting those 5,000 people as residents to say, hey, we need more handicapped parking spaces, we need a recreational center, we need this and we need that. You're counting these people.
They are counted, yep.
But they can't benefit from the fact that, you know, they're able to go to that same park that just got built off of their numbers with their kids.
Most of the time when there is refusal on banishing different systems or adding programs, money is the common driver. So what about the money is going on that they're so hard pressed to not let go of it?
They have stuff like that and they say, we need people at the Civic Center, or we just had a flood, we need people to come clean this road, or we had this. Why are they not saying, we need to hire 15 people down here at the Civic Center, we need to pay 20 people to come and do this? Why are they not doing that, and why are they choosing to use incarcerated people?
Because it would cost them money instead of making, it would cost them money and not make them money.
And the goal is to make money.
And the goal has always been to make money. And also, it's always to keep the city in a position of dominance.
Here in Columbus, I know trash went from 2 days to 1 day a couple years ago. And last year, the mayor was cited in an interview that he did with the news that the residents were complaining because trash had been backed up and folks were complaining why it wasn't being picked up. And they asked him what was the reason why the trash wasn't being picked up. And he said, well, we don't have enough prisoners, i.e. we got a shortage of slaves. And so I immediately felt like when you say we have a shortage of slaves, the result is we got to figure out what we have to do to get more slaves, to get out here to dump more of our trash.
When I went to the license plate making factory, what I was told was that folks who were chosen to work this job were chosen because they would be there for a long time. Now, if it's a training job, if it's intended for you to be able to transition to another job, then wouldn't you want folks for whom that transition is going to happen? Wouldn't you want as many folks to be helped as you could?
They should be able to just transition right on into that job, because obviously it's a job because they had them doing it. So why couldn't, if I'm doing it right now and I'm getting out in 6 months, why can't I just transition and that's my job when I get out?
It's making too much money for it to make sense right now.
And the criminal legal system itself is based on a monetary
thing.
You know, the IRS, Walisha, even has something on their website that makes a notation that just because a person is incarcerated does not exempt them from paying federal taxes, federal income taxes, if they qualify to pay them. And the Department of Education has a notice on their site that lets people know that they don't get an automatic deferment just because they're incarcerated and not making money from paying those student loan payments. So I want people to be full well aware that we have federal regulations that make sure we're still paying on things that we owe on, even while we're in carceral systems, slavery systems in the state that don't allow us to make money.
If you took away what the I hate this word, but what the inmates do inside of facilities, that would open up so many doors for so many community members who are without jobs.
Once you become a ward or of the state or the feds, there's no way for you to get reintroduced into society as a regular American citizen.
They can work you for free because you don't have the rights to defend yourself. You don't. That's why when you get out, you gotta get your right to vote back after a certain time. You gotta get your right to bear arms after a certain time, and that's if Georgia decides to give them to you. They don't come back automatically.
Voting rights, right? So some people say, oh, restoration of rights, but there's another step there, right? Why are you losing your rights at all?
That people who have lost everything because of incarceration are the people who are the most willing and able to commit to jobs when they come out. Those people can be committing to those jobs when they're inside.
The method doesn't match what's actually happening, right? If it were training, we should see the program focused on transition, but that's not what we're seeing.
This society had basically created mental health problems in our community.
The degree to which we criminalize and incarcerate folks, it really fuels the cycle of poverty in our state. You know, it really, really does. We are taking resources from people and putting them into a system that only makes things worse for those people and then everybody that those people, you know, is associated with.
We got to go deep into the DNA of this whole system because we cannot fix this system. We're to create our own system, and system still sharpens steel, system sharpens systems. So as we build our own system, that's going to be the primary thing. When they come out, they got to be a part of this system that we're creating.
In order to end mass incarceration, we have to have an employment component.
People being able to contribute to their communities and reap the rewards of that is how you build sustainable communities, period.
How can you prevent crime if you do not give people the tools and resources to be able to better themselves and come back to a contributing member of society?
And part of that resources is a job.
We have to create a post-incarceration reentry system that actually guides them into a trade or a profession.
To change the charter to allow someone with charges, that's part of it, to change the city ordinances and state laws to allow, you know, people with records to actually work for the government. I mean, they're already working.
They're already working for the government. They just ain't getting paid.
Why not have different amendments made to keep them working?
The more states we get who are willing to say out loud, we don't support slavery here, we are going to change it at the state level, the more push we get for the federal.
Common sense says this is why our crime rates are high, this is why our homelessness is high, this is why our communities are the way they are, because we're not giving people what they need to succeed. And when people don't have a job, you're going to continue to have high crime. And to actually train somebody, to use somebody under the guise of saying it's for training, and then when they get out because they have a felony, they can't get a job.
It's
It's an excuse.
A show of hands, how many of you all knew that when you're incarcerated, you're still obligated to pay taxes and student loans? By a show of hands, how many of you actually thought that people in prison get paid? It's okay if you think they get paid. It's okay. They don't get paid a dime in Georgia. In California, they made 18 cents. Is it an hour or a day? An hour. And Pennsylvania is 15 cents an hour. Yeah. Yeah. Either way it goes, considering that a bar of soap can be as much as $4, a pack of sanitary napkins for a woman can be as much as $15. That's nothing. And considering you have children that are being taken care of, phone calls can be as much as $15 for 8 minutes. It's just expensive. You still have child support. Child support does not stop. But I just want to make sure and clarify that we are going after Georgia's Constitution not to get wages for people. We want to end it, period. However, if people want to work, it should be voluntary, and then when they do get paid, it is to be at the same market rate that other folks are working. Right now, there are currently incarcerated people working at Amazon, standing next to somebody making $28 an hour, and they're making $0. There's nothing about that that's right. So just for a quick minute, maybe 5 minutes, Nikki was in the film. Nikki was a teacher in prison. Lucy, what you did in the prison besides cause trouble? She did maintenance, and I was on a walker and was supposed to be having back surgery. I was 650 pounds when I went to prison, and they wanted me to bust rocks. So I said, I ain't busting no rocks. So they put me in solitary confinement. So if y'all will join me up on stage, we may have a couple of people have a couple questions. I think we have enough time for a couple of questions. Lucy, come on. You may have time for a couple of questions. So if you stand up, feel free if you have a question. Anything you want to ask, if we can answer it, we'll definitely do. I want to just shout out Lucy. I love Lucy. Lucy was the first person in the United States to ever be accepted to law school while still in prison. She just graduated from John Marshall Law School and is my unofficial lawyer. So I'm excited. But yeah, Lucy. Anybody got any questions for me or Lucy?
I just, yeah.
Talk loud, be loud talk.
It's a lie.
You want to repeat her question for the people who couldn't hear?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Her question was, and she's from Texas, but people are told that when they go into prison, they are obtaining work skills, so when they get out, they have skills.
There's so much nuance to that question. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, the Department of Corrections in Georgia has a relationship with the Georgia Technical College system, and people do get certifications, but I'm going to tell you about the nuances of that. You couldn't actually take that certification or any amount of hours that you earned toward it and apply that to credits at those exact same technical schools. So I just want to make it clear, this is supposed to be for education and job training, but you know, like I earned 2 building maintenance certificates while I was in prison, and even if I wanted to do that, I would basically have to start over because even though I have those certificates, I don't have credits earned at those technical schools for that. And
so again,
yeah.
it goes away from it. If the goal is to rehabilitate people, to give them skills for them to have on the outside, then why are you denying people the opportunity to get out for one in the first place? Lucy could have been a hell of 5 maintenance, and they could have said, we ain't gonna let her go because she's too good at her job. But why are you giving people skills if they're not gonna get hired on the outside? Nobody in their right mind, if they've worked you for 10 years for free, is gonna pay you when you get out.
I also think it's important to note, Walisha, that there are exceptions in our state statutes, for instance, for correctional officers and Department of Corrections and jail employees to directly benefit personally
from services provided by incarcerated workers, talking about cars being detailed, dogs being cleaned, houses being repaired.
And of course, the women, CEOs get their hair done.
Yeah, hair all day, and you know, you gotta have somebody in cosmetology. People get moved around the state just because they're good at doing hair, and the warden there likes that. So we want to be clear that there's all kind of exceptions for things. I learned last year something crazy happened at my house. We had to get a new air conditioner, and that was fine, but then we had a storm and a limb fell on it. So the fan on the top of the air conditioner was broken, and I called every warehouse in Georgia just trying to get the fan for this air conditioning unit, and they told me that because I wasn't a licensed HVAC person, they couldn't sell it to me. There's Georgia restrictions that you have to be licensed HVAC to get these parts. Do you know when I was in the prison, all I had to do was fill out order forms, get the parts I needed, replace the fans on the commercial air conditioning units that I was required and mandated to work on. I never had an HVAC license. So you see, these exceptions come about when it becomes an economic benefit to the state, and I want people to really understand how deep that is.
Okay, so two unrelated questions. Maybe I'll just give one and sit back down, and maybe there'll be time for a second one. But you talked about people making no money and yet needing to pay a huge amount of money for basic necessities. I'm imagining that either or both inmates tend to run up debt, and if so, does that affect their parole or whatever? Or it's indirectly a way of taxing their families and friends that have to pay outrageous costs while they're in jail just for them to live. And I think about the old company stores in the Mill Villages where they would never get out of debt because they were given quote-unquote payment that could only be used at the company store that overcharged them, so they would never get out of debt to the company and they had to keep working. So is it possible for prisoners to run up debts, or is does this kind of outrageous imbalance basically tend to be a tax on their families?
Yeah, first of all, we just want to recognize that we're people that are incarcerated. But thank you for those questions. It's all right. It's all right. Look, this is a cultural thing. This is not a you thing. I absolutely promise you that. But one thing is, yes, people incur debts that continue to follow them, so that the burden of being enslaved is not just something that affects people while you're being enslaved. It affects people afterward. You know, these are the collateral consequences, the financial and economic consequences that destroy whole communities, right? People can't get credit because they have tens of thousands of dollars of debt with the state for services that they were required to pay while they were working 40 plus hours a week for no pay. I did a whole study on healthcare costs and wrote an article for Scalawag that you guys should check out that talks about healthcare costs and how that relates to how much people are paid. So like,
you know you have to pay to go through,
yeah, co-pays. We're talking about co-pays while you're in prison, right? So basically what we did is show what the average costs of co-pays for seeing a doctor and getting a prescription are outside, and compare that to what that would equate to people inside. And so for states like, for instance, West Virginia, I think because they were only getting paid pennies an hour to work, it would be the equivalent of them paying $300 and a copay on the outside just to see a primary care physician. But then when you get to Georgia, where you don't get paid those pennies even, but you still have to pay a copay to go see a doctor, then there's not even a way to quantify that. You want to answer that second?
And then the part that you were talking about as far as, for instance, let's say you were incarcerated and you had a job, but you had child support. So when you go to prison, your child support is still going. They're not going to stop it. So even though you may have gone to prison owing $5,000, you may come out of prison owing $50,000 in child support. But guess what? Once you get out and do get you a little job at a place that didn't check your background and you're making about $8 an hour, if you don't pay your child support, they take your driver's license. So now you can't get to work. Now you've lost your job. Now because you've done this, they can send you back to prison on technicality. From my understanding, they're not even supposed to take you back when you can't pay a fine. But all of that stuff does mount up, and also that burden is on the family members, because when you're inside, it's your mom who has to spend that $15 for you to talk on the phone for 8 minutes. It's your mom that has to put money on your books. If you're diabetic or a person with diabetes and you have to have your insulin, it is your mom that has to pay that $5 or $10 copay for you to go. If you do not have money on your books to go to the doctor, they can say you don't have money to see the doctor. But how am I supposed to get money to see the doctor, get sanitary napkins, buy soap, if I am not getting paid? How can I pay child support if I'm not getting paid? And let's talk about from the viewpoint of a victim. If a person has done something that they owe you restitution, how are you supposed to get your restitution back if people are in prison are not getting paid? Because it's not to benefit you, it's not to benefit them, it is to benefit the prison system and the bail industry. And we got time for one last question, and then we're gonna move on to the next, talking with the youth. Let's do two. 1, 2.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So in the state of Georgia, if I was to go to jail for child support, okay, and I had to say I owe $100 in child support, the prison systems here in the state of Georgia, the time that I'm sitting for each day that I sit, they don't take the money off of my child support if I went to jail for child support?
No, it just continues to go on. But if you had disability when you went in there, they'll cut that off. You can't get disability while you're in prison.
See,
veterans can get 10% of what they have.
But you're in jail in Pennsylvania.
No, you're wrong.
In Pennsylvania, and you go in for child support, each day that you sit, it takes that money off that child support.
It should, but in Georgia, they charge you to be locked up yourself. So if you're in Georgia and it's $135 a day, you got to pay for being locked up. So what you locking me up for if I got to pay you to lock me up?
You know, when people go, something like 3.5% of people who are going to get released in Georgia, actually 3.5% of over 52,000 people have the opportunity to go to some sort of work release program. But there's a lot of problematic things with that, because these are public-private partnerships, and the state can basically scoop off of your paycheck in a variety of ways. But one of the ways is the Georgia Crime Victim Emergency Fund. I don't know if people are aware of this, but I found it so ironic that the state could scoop these people's paychecks for the Crime Victim Emergency Fund, even if people were convicted of a victimless crime. So I just want to flag those kind of things in our laws.
We're on time, and we have one last question from Pete, and then that'll be it.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you that $11, $12 billion of value, does that include the work that's done inside the prison? Because most of the work that's done in the prison is done by the incarcerated people. So I wonder if that includes, if you have to pay chefs, maintenance people, teachers, all that stuff to do that work, it would cost a bloody fortune. I just wondered if it included that number, included the work done inside prisons.
No, the $12 billion
that's private industry.
Yeah, the 12 that they make off of the labor of incarcerated people is from the work they do inside, but also the work that they do outside. That new bridge that they're building in Clayton County, and incarcerated people is doing that. If you were the average amount of money that they would have made for a day's work of work, and they did 6 months on it, that's contributed to that. So it's also work inside, it's work on the outside. So, like again, they make Starbucks cups, they're making Victoria's Secret lingerie, they're answering phone calls for Verizon, they're making furniture for IKEA, they're making the peach passes, they're making license plates. Over 4,000 companies profit off of the incarcerated labor. And so before we get ready to go, one call to action I will ask for you all. I try to be very intentional that when I spend my money, it's very hard to find, you know, I love to do black-owned business, so it's kind of hard to find black laundromats and stuff like that. But I try to be very intentional that whenever I go spend my money, I do not shop that will not hire me. I have no problem going through a drive-through, ordering $500 worth of food, or ordering $3,000 on an online catering order and say, do you all have people who are impacted by a criminal record? And they say no. I say, you can cancel my order. I try to go to businesses that support me and my people in my community. And I would ask you all to do the same, that when you get the resources and the QR code, to go to our website. When you go to About All of Us or None, go all the way down to the bottom. And when you go to the End Slavery in Georgia tab, there is a list of those corporations. There's a link that'll link you. Go to those companies and find out. I think you'd be very surprised to see the companies that you're shopping with every day and you're spending your money with every day that indirectly is benefiting from slave labor. Wells Fargo Bank is one that also funds prisons. There are some banks that say we will not give loans to private prison corporations, but there are banks that do. And so I implore you, that would be my call to action, to use your money to let people know that you do not support slavery. On Twitter, let folks know why I will not be shopping, or why I no longer drink Starbucks and now I drink Dunkin' Donuts, because they use slavery. Thank you so much for bringing Dunkin' Donuts, because had you brought some Starbucks up in here, we would have had a problem. Thank you all so very much. Lucy and I will be around. She's also in another capacity, which is great, with her organization, Atlanta Community Support Project, about the criminalization of poverty and all kind of good toolkits and stuff. So make sure you all see us, but definitely go to our QR code, share the video, and just ask us questions, but also just really just think about it. Also, we're starting a new thing called Wall of Shame. So if you're in the city and you see people working for free, take some pictures, email them to us, and let us know what city you're in, and we're going to blast them out on social media, let them know everybody knows they support slavery.
Can I say one thing? As you think about these companies, for instance, Ashley Furniture, okay, they are notorious for using forced labor. But, you know, look on some of these websites. Lazy Boy does not. Lazy Boy has a statement on their website that says, we do not use forced or involuntary labor. So look for those things, ask those questions. It's all kind of industries that is affected by this.
And don't be ashamed to feel bad about it.
Back to be the taskmaster. I know this was wonderful. We're gonna pivot and talk about our young people. Y'all have heard a lot about some of the legislation coming out of the Capitol that are coming for our children. They're coming for our kids, and we're not having it. But we have a treat today. Some young people from Deep Center is going to do a skit for us to kind of give us a visual of a little bit of what you've been hearing about that's being legislated over there. And sometimes you got to see it up close to really understand what's happening in our communities. And so I will give it to the folks at Deep Center.
Hi, everybody. Is it morning still? I don't know. Good afternoon, good morning. Greetings, salutations. Peace be with you. My name is Marissa Arnold. I am the Director of Youth Programs with Deep Center, and I have my life navigator. He is a mentor. He is a motivator. He is Mr. Julius Campbell. And we have our young adults that are with us who are with our Work Readiness Enrichment Program. Can y'all say y'all names real quick?
My name is Kayvon Orr.
My name is Zyrie Colbert.
My name is Akeem Jones.
And again, I'm Julius Campbell.
So I'm not going to be up here long. They have a skit for you guys that is going to portray different responses. There is a bill that we have been informed of. It's the School Discipline Bill, HB 268, and it says it would create a statewide behavioral threat assessment management system, including a school and student safety database to collect and integrate data about potential student threats. And there's just a number of things that is very vague about that and just left open to interpretation. But what we want to address with you guys is the school to prison pipeline simulation, which is very, very real. Statistically, it is widely disproportionate as far as Black students getting reprimanded, having a zero tolerance policy, and then there being adverse effects to where they are now systems impacted compared to counterparts, right? And a lot of that happens directly in the schools when we are working or when they are interacting with school resource officers. So we're gonna do a little bit of skit, we're gonna do a skit. We're going to do a skit, but it is important. That's better. I like this actually. It is important to be mindful of your interactions and your encounters with students in the school setting, right? The way you respond can really determine if they're going to go and if you are going to contribute to the school to prison pipeline system, if you will, or if it is a restorative approach that can enhance the relationships between students, SRO officers, guidance counselors, teachers, what have you. So it's all about the response. And with that.
Ready? Now, what we want you to definitely look for is the opportunity to be creative in how you respond to circumstances and situations. Stop. The bell is ringing. The bell is ringing. Time to report to class.
Go to class. Go to class.
Hey, did you not hear me say go to class, partner? Huh? Hold up, pull this thing out. Now, that's the first thing we wanted you to see. Now watch how we could have handled this differently, and then we'll get a chance to share. Time to report to class. Time to report to class. Clear the halls.
Something wrong? Yeah, we trying to see what our dad at. What's going on? I don't know. We're in trouble. Yeah, I want to go to the counselor, see, make a phone call? Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Have a seat. What we shared with you just now is that in our school system, thank you. In our school system, we don't know how to respond to our young people. We automatically go at them with an aggressive behavior, and oftentimes we've learned that aggression begets aggression. And so in the first skit, what we did is we wanted you to see that just a simple situation, two students were talking about something that was concerning them at home. The SRO did not know that, and so the way that he approached them caused a conflict. And because we are not trained sometime in conflict management or resolution, we get what we just got. Usually what happens then when they go to the principal's office, or as he was assaulting the SRO, he's automatically sent to juvenile. And we've learned that 67% of students who go to the juvenile court system eventually wind up in prison. That's where we get our school to prison pipeline. So what we want to learn how to do is creatively and restoratively respond to situations. In the second enactment or skit, all he had to do was just ask, what's wrong? And then we would understand that we can have a creative solution. So we just wanted you to see how we can, each of us, learn how to critically think through our responses. Do we have any questions?
Any questions, or anyone have any experience where you've had a story of a young person and they said things just went completely south, and it was because they didn't ask or they didn't have the opportunity to explain themselves?
I'm wondering now that y'all have acted that out, and I know even in preparing to do that and probably haven't been in that situation, do you have a way of educating an adult that's coming at you incorrectly in that moment? Do you think about that sometimes? Because I do wonder, because I think doing skits and acting is so therapeutic and educational. I wonder how, if you've had a chance to take what you've learned and taught us to teach other adults. Because you know we're going to come wrong a lot of times.
Go ahead, be serious. So like, I could be in the class talking or playing, and the teacher will pull me out, and he'll tell me to separate myself from the others so I can stay on task. And
It's a conversation.
yeah, it's a conversation.
He was saying it's a conversation as opposed to, and he takes him outside, as opposed to it leading to, it can be embarrassing, it can be degrading, it can be, you know, all of the things where you call them out in the midst of everyone else. Can you share about as a life navigator?
Some of the things that we've learned as a life navigator, well, the number one thing is building rapport. A child really doesn't automatically give you their attention unless they really believe that you care. And so one of our key goals as a life navigator is to build relationship, rapport with these young men, and then they feel like that wall can come down and they can share, because we don't just deal with the academic aspect of what's going on in school, we also learn parenting. We also learn about the social-emotional aspects of what's going on in their homes. And that breaks down barriers and gives us a chance to pull them aside. Because if we're honest, in the culture that we live in today, most young African-American men, they respond differently than they used to. And so when they see a life navigator come up to them versus a parole officer or a probation officer, we learn how to say, hold up, whether it's with a tap on the shoulder or come on, let's come and talk to the side, or just we learn how to respond differently than other people respond. Now, don't get me wrong, some days we have to time out. That's just life. I might be going with a situation with him, something is going on at home. And I tap him, I say, Zai, his name is Zaire. I say, Zai, what's up? Man, I don't feel it right now. So rather than me getting emotional with him, then we have another life navigator or teacher that say, let's time out. Campbell, you step aside, let me try. So there are creative methods of how we learn to respond to our young people.
I feel like RUP is a good space where you can say and tell how you feel without being judged. I feel like RUP is a good space where you can say and tell how you feel without being judged.
Did y'all catch that? Without being judged. That's what he said. Something that, I'm sorry. Oh, REP. So that is the program that our young people are in. It's Work Readiness Enrichment Program. Is it okay if I share about?
He wants to share about REP.
No, I want to see what it's in. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me explain.
Oh, you said it already?
Yeah, but no.
REP stands for Work Enrichment. Work Ready Enrichment Program.
There we go.
And one thing they want to do is they want to introduce themselves and share what their desires are for the future. So they can just briefly introduce who they are.
My name is Kayvon, or I'm originally from South Carolina, but currently live in Savannah, Georgia. I go to a program called REP, and I plan to graduate and have a big future.
I'm gonna sit down. My name is King Jones for Savannah. My name is King Jones from Savannah, Georgia. I grew up in West Savannah, and I live on the east side sometimes. And I'm in middle school right now, but I'm trying to graduate and go to high school. So when I go to high school, I get my CDLs, truck driver, something like that. Or if I don't do that, I might just be an electrician or something. And yeah.
How you doing? My name is Zaire Coburn. REP, it's a good program. It has helped me get my TWIC card. It take you on different field trips. so you can experience new things. And like, it motivates you, like, to get your high school diploma, and then pay you to go to school while learning and like gaining knowledge that they gave you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. Yes.
I got a question, and I got just a comment. What are your ages?
15. I'm 15.
15.
18.
You on my age too?
The OAA in Birmingham.
Okay, yes.
It took a lot for those young men to come up there. It takes a lot for us to sit up there. So at first you came up and you were, you were uncomfortable, and that's okay. But as words were spoken over you all to improve, to empower you, you all began to open up even the more. I saw that, and I commend you. And my key word to you is to excel and do well in life. You all have done great things by spitting and doing your skit before us, and that took a lot. I commend you as young men that are going to go well in life. Thank you.
And for those who don't know what OAA stands for, that's Offender Alumni Association. And I want to say something on that as it relates to myself and our young people, is because in life, we may start out wrong, but look at us now. We get an opportunity and a platform to finish strong. And that's what we teach our young people, and just not this platform, but those that are still at the school, is even though you start wrong, you can finish strong, and that's what we're able to do. So thank you for this opportunity.
Two things. One, I wanted to ask him, as far as, do you understand that card that you have? What opportunities you have with that card? Do you understand your Twix card? Yeah, do you understand the opportunities you have with that card?
Yes, sir.
Are you actually moving forward to actually implement?
I've been going down there, I went down there 2 times, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Now, you know you can work on a ship, you can work, that's a transportation card to get you into secured areas.
It's something called a YES program. I had signed up for it 2 days ago. It started for the summer.
Do you have your own transportation by chance?
Yes, sir.
Then you can use that to actually have your own business. It only takes $100 to incorporate and $50 to open up an account. So if you have someone to assist you with that, you having that card can get you your own business to where you can actually pick up contracts to deliver stuff. Because now you can go into secured areas in order to pick up those packages to deliver them. You see? So you can make money on your own. You don't have to work for anybody, you can work for yourself. Just FYI. That was my thing.
When we get off the stage, we coming to see you.
With him, because I promote self-employment, I love it. For you, when you said you wanted to go to, have a big future, what does that future consist of? Because you didn't specifically say what that future consists of. You just said big future.
Getting a good job and living life.
Is there any profession you're interested in actually going into?
Welding, probably welding.
Welding? Okay, well that's pretty good. Now there are a lot of free. Just so y'all know, if you do not actually have this dream of going to college in a sense, because you feel as if you cannot afford it, ask your parents not to claim you in your 12th grade year, and you can go independent and qualify for all the grants and all the free money that's gonna get you a free ride in college. Don't let your parents claim you on their taxes. File your own taxes in your 12th grade year. You know, when you start school in that September and you graduate that next May, that end of that year, don't let them claim you for that following year that you graduate, okay? Because that will allow you to be as far as low income, and you will qualify for a whole bunch of grants and a whole bunch of free money that's gonna get you through college in your first, second, and third year, okay? But most people don't know that, because most parents claim their child because they want that big check. But they're hurting you, they're doing a disservice to you. I learned that at a company that I volunteered for. He was getting a lot of individuals that was unhoused. He was getting them into college, and I was like, how are you getting these people into college with no money? And he told that was the trick. He said they have to file taxes, even if they say they were self-employed and file $1. File something, because it'll put you in that income bracket to where you can actually qualify for all the grants. You just have to file. That's it. But just don't let your parents claim, because then you inherit their income. And that's what throws you out the box. Most of the time.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more? Okay.
Okay, thank you all for standing up to speak up. And I can say this bill about criminalizing student behavior, I'm glad it wasn't around when I was in school. I mean, I wasn't even a particularly malicious kid, but I just was mischievous. And I would say, because of the time and because of the color of my skin, I didn't get criminalized. But I understand that a lot of people do, and I understand that it's even worse for black female students than for black male students, at least from some things I've heard. Do y'all have any quick source, by any chance, for statistics on the inequities of school discipline and how it's administered? Just out of curiosity. I know I can find it somehow.
No, we do have a fact sheet. We'll figure out how we can disseminate that to everyone, but it does have facts about how disproportionately SROs are hired as opposed to school counselors. It has statistics about black and white counterparts and how often they are put into the system for the same offenses, and how zero tolerance policies impact black and brown students more than other counterparts as well. So we'll be able to do that. We'll figure that out for you, for sure.
It's not a question. Just can you quickly say what SROs are?
Oh, school resource officers. Yes, and I guess to tie it all together, our program is an alternative school setting for youth who are systems impacted, to where they may have been expelled or suspended from their home school. They come into the REP, which is the Work Readiness Enrichment Program. It's a partnership with Savannah-Chatham County School System, with Deep Center, and then with Chatham County Juvenile Court. And we have all of these resources. We have life navigators, we have behavioral aides, we have certified teachers, even probation officers to an extent, and we all work together collaboratively, and restoratively, so that we can provide opportunities, so that Zaire can get his TWIC card, so that Kayvon can figure out what pathway he wants to go, so Nakeem can do credit recovery and then get to his right grade, and then they return to their home schools if they so choose, or if they want to graduate out of the program. But with a bill such as, was it 628? I'm sorry, 268, excuse me. 268, just looking at their sheet, I guess, if you will, that already puts them at a disadvantage in labeling them as threats when they are not the sum of their mistakes. Nobody are. And it's just really, opportunity. I think a part of it said that it can be anonymous, inserting whatever you feel is a threat level. That's subject to interpretation. That's subject to unconscious bias. There's so many discrepancies that can happen with that. But that's why we have our program where we are going to advocate. We will bring our young people up here to vouch for themselves, to show examples of how it isn't fair and how there are opportunities for growth and advancement in a just and equitable way. Thank y'all.
Is your program in Savannah, is it the only one in this state, and is it the only one in the country?
Excuse me. we modeled this program after the largest recidivism program in the world, which is Homeboys Industry in California. REP specifically is modeled after that, and to our knowledge, we are one of those alternative recidivism programs between, again, our local school area, juvenile court, and then our nonprofit organization. Not yet, but that's definitely something I guess that we can not saying we can figure out, but it is a model that needs to be looked more into and replicated for sure, for sure. Yes, presently, yes.
Give them another hand. Thank y'all again for coming. Always coming to teach us a little something. That's a big something. Y'all have done so great. I haven't heard any cell phones going off, no music. It's been wonderful. Y'all came in ready. But again, thank you. Hopefully you've been able to participate in the activities. One charge I do have for you next year, this is an annual event. Next year when you come ready to bring some more folks with you because we appreciate you and we need to continue to keep our reach far and wide. At this time, I'd like to invite Kenneth King, come on up. I'll be messing up people's names, so don't hold it against me. I'm sorry, Kenneth. Do you want the mic?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenneth King, and I'm the Movement Policy Associate at the Southern Center for Human Rights. And during this time, we just want to take a moment to honor the family of Noah Bush. So I am also a part of the Just Georgia Coalition, which was created in 2020 after the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. A lot of organizers, faith leaders, Georgia-based community organizations gathered together in the response of the leaked video. The leaked video of Ahmaud's death was followed by rapidly increasing visibility, resulting in the interest of the case from a number of national actors. It became apparent that this influx had the potential to overwhelm and overshadow the organizational infrastructure that the local community had. The Just Georgia Coalition formed as a mechanism to move local and statewide demands, direct national organizations, and strengthen social movements in Southeast Georgia and throughout the state. We believe that social transformation begins on the local level. We pause to listen to the voices within the communities we enter. We honor the strong revolutionary Black organizing history in Georgia, and for that reason, we know that rural, city-dwelling, and small-town Georgians are more than capable of determining for themselves what they need. We reject monetization of our struggle and insist on resources being expended and support the work that our people most need. We turn away notions that tragedies are an opportunity to be exploited and instead seek to build together using our pain as a reminder of what is at stake. We take this moment to honor the life and legacy of Noah Bush. At just 8 years old, Noah went out to play with his friends and was later discovered deceased. His family and friends and community have tirelessly advocated for transparency and accountability from the sheriff and the Wayne County Sheriff's Department. After almost a year, the family is here today to tell his story and to share his light. Black children are still facing the effects of the Jim Crow South while they are being taught that this experience is too uncomfortable of a topic to learn about in school. While racialized bullying and current law prevents them from learning history in schools, Black children are now being subjected to state-sanctioned violence. Noah was failed several times by the school system and by his government. Noah's bright spirit touched everyone who he knew and who knew him, and his memory serves as a powerful reminder of the potential and innocence of all children. Noah deserves to be here today, and I just want to take a moment to read an excerpt from Toni Morrison's book, Beloved. Let the children come, and they ran from the trees towards her. Let your mothers hear your laugh, she told them, and the woods sang. The adults looked on and could not help but smiling. Then let the grown men come, and she shouted. They stepped out one by one from among the ringing trees. Let your wives and your children see you dance, she told them, and ground life shuddered beneath them. Finally, she called the women to her. Cry, she told them, for the living and the dead, just cry. And without covering their eyes, the women let loose. It started that way, laughing children, dancing men, crying women, and then it got all mixed up. Women stopped crying and danced. Men sat down and cried. Children danced. Women laughed. Children cried until all exhausted. So now I want to invite the family and the council of Noah Bush, and we just want to honor them in this moment and say that we love you and that we see you and that we're here for you and that we will not be moved because we know that we are a tree with deep roots and that it will expand. And so we want to offer you this plaque.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Demetrius. This is my mother, Valerie, and my husband, Stephen. Stephen and I are the parents of 8-year-old Noah Bush, who was tragically killed on May 15, 2024, by 2 juveniles, ages 10 and 11. These past 9 months have been painstaking, and the shock still hasn't worn off. I personally still live in disbelief that our son is gone. Every time I pass his photos or glance his awards in my living room, in my head I repeat, I can't believe he's never coming back. May 15th, 2024 started out normal just as any other day. I never foresaw what was to come. I never imagined I'd lose my son on a random normal Wednesday. As a parent, you never imagine burying your child. It is not in the natural order of life. We imagine our kids growing up, living their dreams, going off to college, getting married, bringing you grandbabies, and then finally visiting you as you live out your final days. Noah will never get to experience life after age 8. His future was stolen, and our future as a family is forever changed. We are still trying to find a new normal, if that even exists, but the life that we once knew and loved, we will never get it back. I can still hear him walking into the house on May 15, 2024, saying, "Mama, I'm home." The laughter we shared, the sound of his voice, the smile on his face are moments I can only cherish but never get to enjoy again. The search for our son was devastating, but the ultimate blow was to hear we found him and he's gone. It's a nightmare that no parent should ever have to live through, and not being able to see or hold my son in my arms crushed me. But I refuse to accept that his death was an accident. I did receive backlash and negativity from some people. However, the majority of my community heard my cries and believed in me. They made calls, sent emails, wrote letters, reached out to me constantly, stood on sidewalks from day to night in the heat and rain demanding justice for an 8-year-old boy most had never met. Noah's tragedy reached different cities, counties, states, and even countries. The outpour of love that was shown to our son and our family is something we will never forget. There were advocates that traveled to march with us, stand with us, and demand justice for our child. To hear his name shouted from the crowds is something he always imagined, and it was beautiful, but it hurt more than words can ever express. He just wanted to grow up and become someone great. I have spoken so much on the tragedy that claimed our son's life, but never enough about who he was, how he lived, or the impact he had on his family and our community. Noah became Jessup's baby. On my social media, I share his jokes, his pictures, his videos, and sometimes I just talk about him. He was such a bright light in a dark, cruel world, a good friend and protector, loving and kind. He was our glue, joy, and laughter, and he deserved to live and become everything he wanted to be. He loved sports, mostly football. He wanted to be just like Justin Jefferson. He knew all his stats, his dance, and even tried to mirror him on the football field. To him, Justin was the greatest football player of all, and he needed to learn what Justin knew so that he could be great as well. He wanted to grow to be 7 feet tall so that he could dunk on all the basketball stars, including LeBron James. He was our special little boy, motivated, dedicated, and determined. Noah has made me a better person even before his death. His heart was big, and he was giving and forgiving. To know him was to love him. His hugs were warm, his laughter was contagious, his energy was everything. He had been practicing since the end of football season 2023 up until he was taken away from us because he was determined to make All-Stars. He loved to run around and show us how fast he was, so I called him my supersonic. For every pass that he missed or dropped, every basket he didn't make, every time he didn't beat his running record, he always yelled out, "I'll never give up." And that is the motto that has stuck with me throughout all of this. We were not going to give up on justice for our son because we know our son would have never given up on us. I will say that Wayne County law enforcement failed us and our child. With every red flag the night of his search, all the lies, inconsistencies, and parents trying to deter the search, his death was first ruled no foul play. For 55 days, we protested, prayed, and waited for the truth to be revealed. The truth we already knew. What hurts is the lack of remorse shown from the families and the juveniles. To go home and play Xbox and watch YouTube while our son lay in the bottom of a borrow pit filled with water as if his life didn't matter. But it mattered to us, the family that knew and loved him. But what's more painful is that a sentence of 2 years in confinement is all our son's life was worth. An entire life cut short by the hands of someone else is only worth 2 years. We are not satisfied, and we will never see that as true justice when our child will never come home again. It is an injustice, pretended justice, from a system that continues to fail our youth. I pray no other family has to suffer our fate, and that no other child who just wants to be a friend, no judgment, sharing, loving, and forgiving like our son has to suffer his fate. We do not feel his case was taken seriously, nor investigated thoroughly. Questions that should have been asked during interrogations were not. The location where his body was found was left open and unsecured. Evidence that was presented was brushed off, or either left out at the scene, or the public was still accessing the location the day after he was found on May 16, 2024. And also, we requested assistance from the GBI to take over the case, and that was also denied. We do not believe and never will that we have the full truth of our son's death, and that will forever haunt us. Lastly, I will say we live in a world where perfection just does not exist. We are not perfect parents, but we were good parents. We loved our son. We rotated our schedules to fit his needs. We never missed a practice or a game or a track meet or a field day. We were there for every moment of his life. Noah is truly missed in our home and in our town by teachers, church members, students, and friends. Those that knew him and loved him, and even those who didn't, grieve with us. I watched the tears roll from children's faces at his honor ceremony on February 11th of this year when his school dedicated a swing in his honor. And my heart truly went out to them because they knew him for who he was. For every yard sign I pass, every bumper sticker I see, I know that Noah is loved. Without those advocating, without my attorneys from the Davis Bosman Johnson law firm, and everybody that helped pursue justice with me and my family, and also my sisterhood that I lean on every single day, I wouldn't have made it this far, and I wouldn't be standing here today. Noah will forever be remembered, loved, honored, as long as I have breath in my body. Thank you so much for having us here today to honor our little supersonic Noah. We are truly grateful.
We'll always love him and love you. Thank you for sharing him with us. Next, I'd like to ask the next panel to come up. More Than a Number. More Than a Number, advocating for parole reform. Do I have enough seats? And this is Women on the Rise.
I was in high school. I always wanted to be a cheerleader. I always wanted to be in technology. I wanted to write books.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to do. And, when I was a teenager, my name was, I always wanted a Corvette, and I called myself Princess. Yeah. And then I got a hold to the drugs. And it turned me on to the drugs. I started smoking marijuana at first. It started out with drinking because I was raised in an alcoholic, violent environment, and we didn't have, but grandma made sure we ate, but we didn't have a lot. But I didn't know we didn't have a lot back then. And so I was in high school and I was doing good until I got introduced to drugs. It's a lot of innocent people in prison. I've done 21 years off this life sentence. And for $40 worth of crack. And back then when I was sentenced, there was a ratio crack versus cocaine. Crack was in the black neighborhoods, cocaine was in the white neighborhoods. So if they got caught with cocaine, they got lesser sentences. And crack. And I was in Atlanta Journal. They did a front page on my case in 1994. It was called Unequal Justice. It was 429 people serving life for drugs, and 419 of us was black, and 90% of us was users. How do you expect us to make it? Because a lot of people, we're not given a chance, so we feel all these different emotions, and because when you're in prison, you're locked up, you're holding a lot of stuff in because you don't have an outlet. And then they say to get counseling in jail. You don't get no counseling. They might see you, come out and see how you doing for 5-10 minutes. There's no counseling because we have emotions, we have stuff way back from our childhood. We have to deal with stuff, the abuse, molestation, all the things that we went through childhood. And we don't get any services while we're in prison. And just give us a chance. Give us the resources that we need to get the help that we need. Because we have problems. I mean, we have issues. And, and medication is not always the answer. Mental health medication is not the answer. Some of us need therapy. We need somebody to talk to. We need places where we can go and feel safe and not have to worry about, am I going to have somewhere to sleep? Do I have to go out in the street? A lot of people return to crime because they don't have resources, and they get out and they try, and all the doors are being closed. Open doors for us. So when we do get out, we can be successful, we can prosper. Just open doors for us, and not make it so hard for us.
Well, thank you for showing that video for us from a lady that's, from a lady that is currently serving a life sentence in the Georgia Department of Corrections. But today we're going to be sharing a campaign that we're running called More Than a Number, which Ms. Tony said
is actually called Liberate 381, which is an indication that there are 381 women serving a life sentence in Georgia Department of Corrections as of today. So I'm going to introduce our panel. My name is Trendalyn Browning. We have Robin Hassan, Melody Rosser, and Dominique Grant. So Robin Hassan Simpson is the Executive Director of Women on the Rise, Georgia, a grassroots membership-based organization led by Black formerly incarcerated women and others impacted by the criminal legal system here in Atlanta, Georgia. She served 10 years inside of Georgia prison system, and while there, created a newsletter to help uplift and organize women inside. She co-founded a statewide coalition to educate formerly incarcerated people to vote across Georgia called HOPE, which stands for Helping Others Achieve Power and Equity. She also launched Women on the Rise Inside, an arm of Women on the Rise's membership comprised of women currently serving time in Georgia state prisons. She has been featured in local and national news speaking about mass incarceration and voter disenfranchisement, including Time Magazine. Robin Hassan Simpson, everyone. All right. And then next we have Ms. Dominique Grant. Dominique Grant is the current Campaign and Operations Manager for Women on the Rise, Georgia. Dominique, born and raised in the Bronx, New York, with the understanding that the people around her deserve more resources than what was provided. She grew up directly impacted as a child of an incarcerated parent. In 2015, Dominique had the opportunity to intern at the White House under the Obama administration and soon realized her passion was on the ground. In 2015, Dominique graduated undergrad with a BA in Political Science and Communications at a predominantly white institution, Wesleyan College. During her time in Wesleyan, she was able to assist the school in organizing to get their racist history removed. So that is Ms. Dominique Grant, everyone. And then we have, last but not least, Ms. Melody Rosser, AKA Pooh, for y'all who know her. Yes. She started with Women on the Rise in June of 2022 as the assistant to the executive director. Melody was harshly convicted of a crime during her teen years and spent 20 years of her life incarcerated in Georgia State Prison. During her time inside, she used her access to the system to improve herself and the women around her. She completed many programs inside, such as receiving her license in cosmetology, completing the dog program and vet tech program, along with welding and a multitude of other skills. Melody does not hesitate, and anyone that's out here that's a member that knows her, to share her skills. She will share whatever resource she has with you, and to share her skills and drive at what kept her successful during her prison sentence, which proved for her to be perfect for her role as she was promoted in August 2022 as the membership organizer. Since starting her role, Melody has been able to foster relationships with members of Women on the Rise that promote stability and safety for women re-entering society. Melody's motto is, "I am well-read, not well-lived." Ms. Melody Rosser, everyone. So now we're going to get into just some questions based on this new parole reform, this video that you all saw, those different things. So I'm going to ask just a couple of questions. So we're going to start with you, Ms. Robin. So we're going to talk about life sentences and the impact of life sentences on families. So Robin, as I read in her bio, she served 10 years in the Georgia Department of Correction. And so while I know that you have had many conversations with women serving life sentences, can you share what they may have expressed to you about the impact of life sentences, not only on themselves, but also on their families while you were incarcerated with them, and how now working on that parole reform campaign actually helps you based off of those conversations?
Okay, so while inside, I spent a lot of my time with lifers. And what I found was being with them is a lot of them have just like really given up on the system. The thing is, when they come up for parole, they get these letters that could be months old from their counselors saying that due to the nature of their crime, they are not fit for society and they're being denied. They can be denied from anywhere from 1 year up to 8 years. So what I found a problem with that was they're not telling them, what are you looking for? When someone has spent 20, 30 years inside, they're looking like, I've completed every course that the prison has to offer. I've done every kind of class that they offer. I got all the certificates, but I'm still being denied. I went in when I was late teens, like 17, 18, or in their early 20s. Then they're in their 40s and their 50s, and they're like, I'm not the same person. So the problem is that I really found like we need to find a solution of like at least give them, what are you looking for? What do you want them to have? I think the problem we found that why we wanted to do this campaign is that the humanity has come out of this process. The parole board is actually just looking at a file and deciding, okay, denied. And so we've talked about why we can't get some system where we are doing videos. Even states like Alabama have, in-person parole, and we don't even have that. And so we are looking at how can we bring some humanity back into this process to give women some hope about what, they're changing, and they're changing themselves for the better inside, but that's not being seen. So we're trying to figure out how we can bridge that gap of people seeing people inside as people and not what they have done 20, 30 years ago, and seeing how we can make that become something that people actually work for instead of people just giving up.
Great, thank you. And I know that we've had a webinar and a lot of people from some of those families have come. Do you want to share just some of the things that the families have said about that process so far?
Well, the families are at a loss of what to do. They're like, I don't know what I can do to help my family member. And then one problem we're also seeing is that when people are locked up for so long, they're losing their family. So they're feeling like, I don't have anybody out there to advocate for me. I'm not the same person. What do I do? How do I get people to understand that? So we're trying to, we actually have put together a parole packet that actually can help women to let them know what they're looking for, the parole packet, instead of paying attorneys, thousands of dollars to actually put these parole packets together. We're putting it in layman's terms for people inside to understand, because they're saying we've gotten things before, but we don't understand what we're supposed to do. So we're trying to condense it down to get people to understand you can write your own, packet. You can advocate for your own self. When it comes to organizational help, you got Women on the Rise. There's other organizations that we're in contact with that we can reach out to, say, hey, do you mind writing a parole letter for this person, to show that parole board that they have community support once they are released. So it's really the family's not really knowing what to do, especially when you have people that are still in there under the 7-year law, the 14-year law, and now, as many of you all know, we're at 30 years. So that's what we're finding too, is that they're taking the people that's under the 7 and 14 and they're treating them like they're 30-year lifers. And so we're trying to get them to understand, like, you went in the 90s and here we are at 2025 and we're still getting set off dates and there's nothing else I can do to improve myself or that you're even paying attention.
Thank you. I did hear you touch on the parole packet. I want to ask Melody, because I know while you were incarcerated, Melody, you played a vital role in helping numerous women complete parole packets while you were also incarcerated. But we know that the parole board don't operate like that. Like, there's very little insight or oversight into how they're actually working the parole system. So can you explain like what the process was and how you helped ladies while incarcerated, and now out how you're helping families with the parole packet and just what a parole packet actually looks like?
Okay, so as said in my bio, I did 20 years in prison, and it hits home when it comes to the parole board has no transparency. Seeing ladies come in from diagnostics, fresh from the county jail, I would always tell them, because I'm the first person they see, everybody want to work on their case once they get there. And I would let them know, the parole board has no checks and balances. No one can check the parole board. And so doing this work, showing them how to do a template, you can do this yourself. You don't have to go and get that nice lawyer, Miss Sarah, and all the rest of them that's gonna charge your family all this money and take your money, and sometimes not even turn your packet in. So things of that nature, just seeing that. Myself, even though I had a straight 20-year sentence, I was reviewed every 7 years, and how that impacted my family to get that phone call and say, oh, she may be getting out. Oh, we just wanna make sure and check her address, and then a couple of months later, I'm not out. So putting my sister and my brother on a high and low all the time, I had told them after a while, please don't call my family. Don't get my family hyped up and have my sister crying. I've been in there since she was 14 years old, since my brother was 28. And so the impact that it has on your family is just unexplainable. For them to always get that call, making sure they keep their address the same for 10 and 20 years. Just doing things like that is so detrimental. And then that denial letter that you get that says, due to the nature of your crime, which you can't change something that happened 20 years ago, the nature of that crime is gonna always be the same. So what can a person do? And then a lot of our lifers, they're getting oh, you're approved, but you have to wait 90 days to see what the DA says. And then after that approval, they come back and say, oh, you're denied. Here's a 1-year denial for this year, a 1-year denial for that year. I know a young lady in there has had 8 1-year denials. So we're trying to get the parole board to tell us, what can they do? How can they help themselves? What are you looking for? It's just, sometimes it's hopeless. I don't want to say that, but it is. And just making sure we know, and we're getting in those spaces, Women on the Rise is getting in those spaces, other organizations are getting in those spaces with those hearing examiners and those parole board members, and trying to say, hey, what are you looking for? So I can make a template, send that into the prison, and let the ladies know, hey, this is what you need to send to them. And maybe they'll listen.
Thank you. And I know that we actually did do like a survey with some questions, and the ladies wrote back answering those questions. And do you want to, maybe Dominique, explain what that process was like, sending those surveys and letters into the lifers that are currently there?
Sure. So yes, we did get together, and we were able, and I'm super proud of this, but we were able to send in surveys to all 381 women that we found in a database when we first decided that this is something we wanted to focus on. And one of the key things we had to figure out, one, how can we get this to them? Because obviously there's gonna be a bunch of mail coming in from a particular organization, thanks Legal Action Center. The next thing we did was try to figure out, what is it that these women are experiencing? We left opportunity for them to answer openly what it was that they were expecting and what their experiences were. And it was, the responses that we got were overwhelming. I would say extremely profound. We've posted some of the things that we've gotten back on our social media. But I will say throughout that experience, we've learned that there are a lot of women who are not giving up hope and understand that there is community fighting for them and advocating for them.
Hold that mic, because I do want to ask you one last thing for you, Ms. Dominique. What innovative policies or community-driven solutions do you believe are essential to meeting some of those needs?
Okay. Well, there's a few things. I don't know. You kind of caught me off guard, Trim. Okay. But I think there's a few things. So obviously being realistic with our family members about what's expected and what is expected that they're doing. I'm gonna tell y'all, I have not been locked up in Georgia's correctional system. I have been to jail in Cobb County, but I have not been incarcerated. But I get a chance to see and understand somehow how different prison is. Our loved ones are not, first off, prison has never been to rehabilitate. But we have strayed so far away from the opportunity or the possibility of our loved ones getting any type of stability inside of there that we have to be prepared when they come out to support them through that. One of the things that I've been preaching about with our organization and with our families is harm reduction work, and what does that look like? Understanding that our loved ones are going in there okay, and coming out completely addicted to many substances. So I think that we need to be realistic about what is happening to our loved ones while they're in there, and be real about how we can support them. And that doesn't mean shaming someone for something that they experienced while they were in there, a habit that was picked up, but figuring out ways to support them through that. So.
Thanks, Dom. And Ms. Robin, I want to ask you, so working around this whole parole reform thing, and we know that we're trying to change the laws and the way that it looks. Can you tell us, I think Melody said something about, or you said about set-off dates and then their review dates. Do you want to kind of tell us what that terminology actually means? So as these family members are getting these letters or getting the phone call saying that my date has been set off or I have a review date, what that actually means and looks like?
So starting with review date, right now we're at 30 years for a life sentence, but the majority of the women we talk to are 14 and 7-year lifers. So everybody has a review date that they're going to get. They know that the parole board is supposed to look at your file to determine if you are going to be granted parole or if you're going to be set off. So that review date can happen either 90 days before that date or 90 days after. So what we have been finding, though, is been happening 90 days plus after. And what also I've learned recently is that the date could be February of 2025, but if the parole board doesn't look at your file until May of 2025, then that means I get a 1-year set off. That means that I'm not going to look at you for another year. But it's not going to be for the February date. It's going to be for the May date. So that's one thing we realized, that that's pushing time for people to actually doing more time than what they were told that they were going to do. So that's changing people's review date and when they get that set-off date. Like I said, the set-off date can be between 1 to 8 years. And so for you to be able to get a 14 years lifer, they've done their 14 years, and it's really, to be honest, normal for somebody to get that first set-off date to be 6 to 8 years. That's pretty normal. And then after that, though, when women get to 25 years and plus, then they're getting the 1-year set-off, We have one person that Melody was mentioning, Renee has done 30 plus years on her sentence. And she's someone that has gotten 8 1-year denials. And so the time just keeps going on, and she's gotten to the point like, what else do I need to do? So those review dates and those set-off dates can change because of how long it takes for the parole board to look at someone's file.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess I will just ask everybody, each of you, if you want to wrap up with one call to action that the audience can do. Oh, I will do the call to action, then questions. So if you have a call to action for the people.
My call is to, when you have someone that is actually locked up or incarcerated, just to make sure, like Dominic said, is support them and understanding what they're going through. A lot of women have told us that family members don't really understand what they're going through, and that's the reason why they do come to us, because we all have experience with incarceration, and we'll give us the family's information. We connect with the families to try to get them to understand, because I get it, my parents didn't understand. I was the first one that was incarcerated in my family. So we don't think it's an act of you just don't care, it's just you don't know. If you haven't experienced, it's hard to even imagine. My own dad still says to me, like, I couldn't have done it, and I was like, you have no choice. You have to do it. But you just don't understand. So my thing is just to be more open and understanding about someone who's going through what they're going through, so they can have a much better transition inside and as well as when they come home.
Thank you. Mel?
My call to action is I challenge people and family members. Prison is not like what you see on TV. I've had a lot of people think, oh, they have a hearing in front of 5 people. This is what's going on. It's not. And since we left in 2020, it's gotten worse. So Women on the Rise has a quarterly webinar that we'll be showing you the parole process, what's going on, how you do this and how you do that. So just make sure, check online, check our website, and you'll be able to educate yourself more and follow us.
All right, thank y'all. And I would say my call to action is to remain involved. Community involvement is important. There was a bill that is possibly being introduced, SB 25, and it was introduced by a legislator that we had a conversation with. Thankfully, we were able to catch the bill before it was completely introduced and noticed that there were some things that were inaccurate about the process. But I say that to say, our legislators don't know everything. I'm not even gonna drag them, but they don't know everything. And they need our expertise. Our families are going through this. We're the ones that are going through this. To propose accurate legislation, period, point blank. So I would just say stay active, stay in contact with Women on the Rise, but also pay attention to what your legislators are putting out. It's a title. They don't know it all. Thank you.
Real quick, Dominique, can you explain what SB 25 is?
Sure. It's a Senate bill that was introduced similarly to what we talked about, but to find ways that we can get more transparency from the parole board. So one of the things that we wanted to suggest was allowing people who are coming up for parole to be able to submit videos. Like Robin mentioned earlier, we are one of the few states where you don't get to see the parole board at all. 3 of them make a decision, the other 2 decisions don't matter, and it's as simple as that. You are literally a packet. And we know in terms of what it means to provide at least dignity in the process. People want to be able to share their story and show how they've changed. So that's the gist of SB 25. If y'all have more questions, y'all could give me after. I'm a little shady towards it. But.
Are there any questions out there? Stay here, Pam.
Hi. So I have a question. I'm Tiffany Kirk, Executive Director of Common Good Atlanta. We do higher education in 5 correctional facilities and 3 transitional centers. But the question that I have is around, I know that ever since COVID, there's been a reduction in correctional officers inside of the facilities. And I know statewide we're short about 7,000 correctional officers. Do you know if this plays a part in, have you seen a difference, I guess, in parole hearings in those that are paroled? Any expedition of moving people through parole because of that shortage, because it is harder to manage larger populations with the lower proportion of correctional officers? Have there been any changes since, say, 2020? Just curious.
The short answer to that is definitely not. We did think at one point, especially during COVID, that they would release people more because, one, it was COVID, and we know we are very short on officers. But what we've learned, well, Pooh and Melody and I have learned is when we were inside is they use women inside to run the prison. They call it institutional need. And I will put a disclaimer on this. You will never find anything about institutional need if you look it up, if you research, because it is a term that is used inside the prison. We know about it because if you are very good at cleaning floors, cooking meals, doing hair, then administrative work. I did a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to be doing, and so if you're good at those things, you become an institutional need. You run in the prison. So they are short on officers, like for count. I shouldn't have been doing anything to count the women in prison, but I was, because they were short on officers doing counts. So they don't think, well, we need to release people because we're short on officers. They just go and get the talents of women and do the work for free to run the prison.
And just to piggyback, another future call to action, because there has been a shortage, right? But now all these federal employees are being laid off and $600 million just got thrown into the system to hire more people. So I would love for us as community to continue to pay attention to how things may or may not change throughout this process. And y'all institutional needs weren't getting paid. They about to pay some other people and for them to still not do their jobs.
Wow. Thank you. Here's another question.
Hi, I'm Anna Ivy, and I have a son that's incarcerated
in a Georgia State prison. I heard several of you ask the question, what are they looking for as far as the parole board? What are they looking for? Have you been able to have those conversations with parole board members, and do you have answers to that question?
Well, I have personally talked to Crystal Moon, and her thing is, well, we don't want to hear nothing about no lawyers. We don't want to talk about that. That's how she sounds, I'm sorry. But she's over clemency, but yeah, she's the one who does it.
No, I'm saying her title.
That's her title. Yeah, she's over clemency, a little short lady, and that's what she says. Y'all, they be getting all them lawyers and stuff now. They don't need to do all that. But she's still not saying, what can I turn into a hearing examiner? What can I put into this packet? You know, oh, give me a call. Yeah, give me a call. It's one of those brush off things. And then knowing that they only meet twice a month. Now, they're getting paid full-time benefits, but they only meet twice a month. And also, I'm on parole, so they meet twice a month to also choose and make a decision on your loved one's life, but also if I can go out of town because I'm on parole. They have a lot of other things that they're going in there for that one day to meet on. And they're not meeting on it how we're in this assembly. I sent the email, you checked it, 2 people look at it, they say no, the other 2 are gonna say no also. And they don't care. And so they're taking this short time, 2 days a month, to choose your loved one's life, to see what they're gonna put your loved one's life in their hands for those 2 times a month. So yeah, they don't care.
Well, thank you, Women on the Rise, Executive Director Robin, Miss Melody Rosser, and Dominique Grant. Thank you.
And Trendalyn Browning, thank you. So y'all are having an opportunity to hear about campaigns that are being led by people who are directly impacted by the policies that they're looking to change. And we need to see more of that and to facilitate that. I'd like to invite our next panel up from New Life Second Chance Outreach. Why am I reading the paper? Because I know my people. But y'all know, don't hold it against me. But I'd like to invite you up, please. Is it just you? Oh, okay. Come on, Shaniqua. You want it
up? Thank you. Hello. I am Shaniqua Bonvillian. I am with New Life Second Chance Outreach, Inc. Let me slow down so I don't stutter. I am the vice chair on the board. We have been around since 2012. I wanted to let you know that we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on advocating for individuals who are justice impacted. So whether that looks like providing resources, helping families with groceries, anything like that. So we do provide those resources to families and individuals. I wanted to talk to you about something that's extremely important, but something that's kind of been overlooked in the criminal justice system, and maybe more so of a tip to help individuals and loved ones. So I want to talk about how you can advocate for an incarcerated loved one in regards to health and safety while they are incarcerated. Give me a minute, y'all. So with your QR code for the event, there is a packet that we have under our New Life Second Chance, I guess, tab in a sense. And it basically talks about how when you advocate for your loved ones while they're incarcerated, there's a certain way to do it. So we have a packet that basically kind of gives you tips, resources on how to talk to your Department of Corrections, and ensure that your loved one is treated with care and respect and as a human. Whether that looks like helping them get their medical services they need. Some people don't get their medications that they need. So we have a great packet that assists with that. And that also can include unfortunately placing someone who needs to be in, solitary confinement, if they have some kind of concern. Because I'm going to be very brief about this, sorry, y'all. So some of the tips that we have offered when it comes to talking to the Department of Corrections would be always be respectful, because we do want to, I don't want to say kiss behinds, but we're going to have to be really nice to them when we come to our loved ones. We are trying to help people, our families, friends, whatever they might be, who have been or are being sexually assaulted, who are part of the LGBTQ community, people with mental health concerns, physical illnesses, that can include someone who needs like HIV medication or anything like that, physical disabilities or limitations, even our pregnant women. So they need all the help, So this is a great way to start advocating for your family, or loved one, excuse me. The second tip I have is to be specific with what you want to state. So what is that real concern? What is the issue you're trying to convey? Kind of be detailed, but also be brief. Talking too long probably will not get the best response, but be very detailed in what you would like to see change. And be persistent about it. Continue to advocate. Don't give up, because they need the support, like Women on the Rise was saying. They need the support, they need the love, they need the help. And then know your limitations by understanding that you may not be able to resolve every issue, but you can also advocate to make a positive impact. So keep trying, never give up, and simply just look out for your loved one. That's kind of all I had, but I wanted to make sure that if y'all do have any questions or need any resources or feedback, I am here at the front if you would like to connect at some point. And please look out for us on our new Life Second Chance outreach page. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for hanging with us the rest of the day. We are down to the wire. You are the champions. Thank you. We appreciate. Moki, I didn't get to come down and hug you. I got hugs to give. If you didn't get a hug from me today, make sure you get it before we leave. But anyway, we have a wonderful speaker for you this afternoon, and I'd like to invite Brian Colon up from Southern Poverty Law Center to introduce our final speaker for the day.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here, definitely sticking out with us. We know it's a long day, but we're happy to have you here, and we're definitely going to have a great speaker to close us out. Today we gather not just as individuals, but as a community united by a shared vision, a vision of justice, equity, and humanity. This is not just about policy or statistics, it's about people. It's about second chances. It's about dismantling systems that have perpetuated inequality and rebuilding them with fairness, compassion, and accountability. And this individual that I have the privilege to introduce today has been a champion of justice reform before and currently as the Minority Caucus Chairwoman under the Gold Dome. Chairwoman Tanya Miller is an accomplished former prosecutor and civil lawyer. She is a former lawyer for the Department of Justice and former Fulton County Assistant District Attorney. Tanya has an extensive background in advocacy, investigations, criminal law, criminal justice reform, constitutional rights, community relations, and crisis management. So you already see is an amazing person. As a former Fulton County prosecutor, she spent 8 years on the front lines of public safety as a prosecutor in the Crimes Against Women and Children's Unit and Homicide Unit, fighting to get justice for victims of unspeakable tragedy. Her current practice specializes in wrongful death, complex criminal defense, and injury cases. Tanya's expertise in constitutional law and public safety has led to multiple appearances on national television networks and podcasts as a commentator on criminal justice and civil rights cases. She holds a JD from Case Western Reserve University, where she was inducted into the School of Law's Hall of Fame in 2021. Representative Miller doesn't just speak about change, she ignites it. She has shown us that progress is possible, even if in the face of seemingly impossible odds. With that, it is my honor to introduce a true champion of justice, a voice for the voiceless, and a force for change. Please join me in welcoming House Minority Chairwoman Tanya Miller.
Hello, family. Thank you guys for hanging out here well into the afternoon on this beautiful day. I am so happy to hear that you gathered to discuss an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and that is criminal justice reform, citizen reentry, and of course, civil rights. And I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. I feel like my background always kind of starts with my first job as a lawyer, but I actually was once a little girl somewhere. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my upbringing, because I do think it informs the philosophy behind my work, both my work as a lawyer, once working for the district attorney's office representing crime victims, to being a criminal defense lawyer representing the accused and specializing in juveniles charged as adults, to being a civil rights lawyer specializing in police violence cases, and also just doing plain old injury work, because civil rights cases don't pay that well unless you're Chris Stewart or Ben Crump, but the rest of us just slug it out in federal court, oftentimes succumbing to the good old motion to dismiss or the motion for summary judgment. The lawyers will get that joke. So I am not a native of Atlanta. I like to say that Atlanta adopted me. I am a native of Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I grew up, the Rust Belt. Yeah, somebody back there from Cleveland. The place where, yes, OH, the place where the sun does not shine, maybe about 2 to 3 months out of the year, and the rest of the time, we're struggling with clouds. But I was raised by a single mother. My mother had me relatively young. She worked, the job that I remember, well, two things I remember mostly about my little times. So the first was her job at Ford. She had a very good job at Ford. I remember when she was working and then she got a union job at Ford. She was an assembly line worker, UAW, 113, I think, 119. I remember that. I remember when she lost that job and how our life changed as a result of that loss. We were part of the working poor. My mother worked every day. I can't even remember my mother taking time off when she was sick. She may have taken a couple days off if I was sick. But back then, we were latchkey kids. We could walk home with a key around our neck. I remember doing that from the time I was in first grade, 6 years old. And so I grew up poor, essentially. And I watched my mother struggle. I watched her go to work every day and still struggle for the basic necessities. But she did it with such dignity and pride, and championed the notion of hard work, like many folks from the South. My mom's from rural Alabama originally. We would suffer lights being off and me doing homework by candlelight. We would suffer the gas being off in the wintertime, and back then you'd have the space heaters and everybody be trying to stay warm around the space heater. But it was not, because I had so much love for my mother, I didn't feel disadvantaged, but I knew that we were economically disadvantaged. And along that road in Cleveland, my mother stressed education, always. If the lights were off, I was doing my homework by candlelight or with a flashlight.
And so it was because of her tenacity, her stressing of education, and also just watching her struggle. I yearned as a young person for an advocate for my mother, right? You see your mom, kids always know more than you think they do, sooner than you think they do. And they know when their mom is struggling, or their dad is in trouble, or their dad needs help, or their mom needs help. They may not be able to articulate it, but they know it's happening. And of course, I knew that my mother struggled, like most working poor people do, to have access to things, to systems, to advocacy, to someone who would fight for her and be a voice for her. We struggled through evictions. We struggled through repossessions. We struggled through unfair treatment at work. All of these things are a part of what made me into the person that I am. And so when I eventually graduated from high school, went to college, had a baby young, so that's another story for another day, but in a lot of ways became my mother, struggling with a young one through law school. My daughter was 6 months old when I started law school, but somehow managed to graduate at the top of my class. Don't know how. I was an okay student in college, but the law just made sense to me. It made me feel secure. There were rules, and if you could apply the facts to the rules, there was a sense of certainty and comfort that I got in that, and so I always have loved the law. When I graduated from law school, at this time, and I'm really gonna date myself, this was just after the O.J. Simpson verdict, and I was obsessed with being Johnnie Cochran. I wanted to be Johnnie Cochran. He was so smooth, you know, with the glove, if you don't fit, you must acquit, all of these things. I just thought he was such an example of what Black excellence looks like in a space that I just was foreign to me. And so as I was kind of making my way through legal jobs, I ended up at big law firms, and that didn't fit. I went to Jones Day and all this stuff, clerked for a federal judge, all that stuff. But I always just wanted to be like Johnnie Cochran, and so they said, well, you know, you want to be a trial lawyer, you gotta learn how to try a case. So in order to learn how to try a case, you had to go to the prosecutor's office. And I was like, what? I can't go to no prosecutor's office? You know, and so I resisted it, but eventually said, all right, I'll go for a little while. And so eventually what I came to know and understand, and this is around the time that I came to Atlanta, is that 99% of the victims looked like me. They looked like my little brother. They looked like my cousin. They looked like my mama. And I began to then understand this concept of justice, and that it was multifaceted, right? There's not just one side to it. And so after serving as a prosecutor in crimes against women and children, seeing some of the most horrible cases you can imagine, to homicides, I came out in private practice. And so I began to represent people who look like me, who look like my brother, who look like my mother. I've represented women who were charged with murder because they defended themselves, right, from their attackers. And I learned that, you know, justice is nuanced. Again, there are all these shades to it. But ultimately, one thing that became crystal clear to me when I was on the other side, representing accused people, is that the system is really designed against you, okay? Now, I became really crafty with it because I had worked on the other side, and so I knew a lot of the secrets. I knew where a lot of the quote-unquote bodies were buried and where the weaknesses were, the chinks in the armor in the system, so it made me an effective advocate for the accused. But there is a tremendous amount, and I'm preaching to the choir right now, of inequity in our system. And you, I think, see it close up when you're sitting next to an accused 14-year-old child charged with murder. Not because he pulled the trigger, but because he was in the back seat of the car when some older kid got out and pulled the trigger. Now, pulling the trigger is a terrible thing, and I don't mean to dismiss that at all, because it's awful. Violence is awful. I abhor it. But there is something wrong with a system, in my opinion, that can look at a 14-year-old child and see a man. Okay? And so from that point on, my advocacy was one at a time. One child at a time, one client at a time, occasionally one victim who ended up being charged with a crime at a time. And so that is an advocacy for my colleagues who do that work. That is exhausting, if you care, when you care. Because that moment is the worst moment of that mom or that dad or that child's life, but you are literally living the worst moment of somebody's life every single day. It is a tremendous sacrifice for the lawyers who do it. I came to understand that when I crossed to the other side. And so for that, I want to thank Devin and Tiffany and all the lawyers out here who expend themselves in this worthy cause tirelessly. And to let you know, hug a public defender, okay? Because they are the ones who stand in the gap, who get the worst rap, and who work the hardest. And I would say, as a prosecutor, I lost one case, and it was against a public defender, one of the best trial lawyers I ever went up against. She was very, very good, still is, and my friend. So I eventually decided that it had gotten to be more than my poor heart could take. I had a client who ended up getting convicted. He was 15, he was about 17 at the time he got convicted. And he went into Jackson. He was processed through Jackson. Terrible crime, for sure. And he didn't last 3 weeks before his body was being taken out of there because he was killed in prison. And I decided, I think somewhere around that moment, although the change didn't happen immediately, that I needed to represent not just the citizens, one person at a time, but all the citizens in the space of policy, and to be a voice and an advocate for a fairer justice system, one that balances the need to, of course, keep us safe, but also to rehabilitate and reenter citizens, that treats people not as the defendant, but as somebody's son, somebody's father, somebody's daughter. Why is that important? I'll tell you why it's important. Because you cannot tell me that you care about public safety if you don't care about rehabilitation and reentry. Because if you care about public safety, then you have to know that if you are not intentional about keeping people out of prison when you can and you should, and then when those times happen, that someone must go, that time in prison has to make them better, not worse. Has to make them want to be a citizen more, not get further lost in isolation and hopelessness. They have to have a trade. They have to learn. They have to be treated humanely. They cannot be kept in a cage. And so it has been my mission to both make the case for why we send so many people to prison. It's insane to me, guys. Can we stop this madness? And then when and if we have to, let us use that opportunity to rehabilitate. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm just going to speak for a second. I think we all know that the United States incarcerates more of its citizens per capita than maybe 1 or 2 other countries in the world, something like that. All of them, Tiffany? All of them. We number one? I thought like Iran or something was more than us. Okay, number one, right? Number one. I personally find that to be so outrageous. In addition to that, when you look at who we incarcerate, it is no accident that even if you're just talking about here in Georgia, Black folks make up a third of the population. We're more than half, is it 60% of the prison population, 50, 60, something like that? It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence, as we used to say in the prosecutor's office. That's evidence. That is evidence that there is something within our system that is disproportionately doing what the system was originally built to do still. So, here's my answer. My answer was to run to be a state representative. Part of my platform was criminal justice reform. I am a strong believer in it. I believe it goes hand in hand with just about every other important institution in our society: education, healthcare, housing, workforce development. All of those things are interrelated. When you are a member of the minority party in the Georgia House of Representatives, I'm sure y'all know this is an excruciatingly painful experience. And I'm not being facetious. It is. It is awful. It is awful to see the callousness with which certain members of the majority party treat fellow Georgians and their own citizens. So I have moved to a different front line. And it is my great pleasure to advocate for policies that will reverse this cycle of mass incarceration and to reverse the cycle of mass disenfranchisement among the formerly incarcerated. There are approximately, oh, thank you. I'm preaching to the choir, right? I got to go back over to Thunderdome in a few minutes, so just give me the love while I'm here so I can just feel it. Thank you. Give me a virtual hug. I'm just kidding. I know y'all love me. I love y'all too. But that there are approximately, just under 500,000 formerly incarcerated citizens who are eligible to vote, but are not registered and not voting, mostly because they don't know that they're eligible to vote. And I want you to think about this. We lost Georgia, I'm not gonna get too political here, but we lost Georgia by about 115,000 votes and elected what has to be one of the worst human beings of all time to the presidency, in my humble opinion. Lord, forgive me. Wow, I'm in the house of the Lord. I try to speak love, but I want us to think about it and look, if we could have, and I don't know the stats for other states, but I'm sure that some states are similar because our law is similar to some other states. There are a handful that do automatic restoration and have other things in place to more quickly re-enter folks into our democracy. But there has got to be a way, and this is where I'm talking to you guys, the activists, the folks who are in the streets, who have your ears and your hearts to the ground. We got to get the word out to folks that they can stop some of these horrible, awful policies if they re-engage with our democracy. Re-engage as a citizen in every way, to include voting. So I don't want to end on a somber note, but I'm just telling you right now, did anybody watch Game of Thrones? You got any Game of Thrones here? Okay. Somebody in here is a Khaleesi, right? Where is Khaleesi? Somebody? Tiffany, raise your hand, it's fine. Yes, all right, there you go. Okay, fine. But seriously, part of Khaleesi's empire was designed to, she built her her warrior kingdom, her army, by freeing slaves. By freeing slaves. By going round and round and round and round and round and freeing them. And because they were freed by her, they followed her and they fought for her. There are a lot of brothers and sisters out here that are walking outside but are not free. I think, personally, one of the things it starts with is the right to vote. Because that is the right that undergirds all others. So let us continue this work together. I am starting a C3 organization as soon as I get out of Thunderdome. I've been working on it for some months now with my friends and some folks on my staff to start putting money behind registering people, C3 and C4. C3 and C4, C3 and C4, I caught myself, C4 and C3. The C3 will do charitable stuff, obviously, helping with housing, because people have to have housing, and helping people get jobs, because people have to have jobs. But what people have to do to protect all of that is vote. So, more on that from me. I'm not going to hold y'all much longer. If anybody has any questions, I'll take one or two before I go. But if you don't, that's fine. Feelings not hurt. I'm just happy to be here. That is it. She said mental health in prisons. What are we going to do to figure it out? I will tell you that the folks who have the ability to do anything and everything to correct the abysmal state of our prison system, it's an embarrassment the way our prison system exists, don't care about it. And here's the part that is always hard to say. If we don't vote them out and replace them with people who do care, because there are billions of dollars, sitting in a reserve right now, not even talking about the revenue, just the billions in reserve. We need to fix it, and we need to vote them out. But yes, it is an important, serious problem. Unfortunately, so I think there may have been some statistics somewhere that someone was telling me, I might be getting this wrong, but something about Ronald Reagan and cutting back on mental health hospitals, and then homelessness going up, and then incarceration rates going up in addition to the war on drugs. We all know that. But the mental health coexists with criminal justice reform, because if we are not addressing the mental health of folks, we cannot really reintegrate them appropriately. And I would say it's not just the prison population, it's everyday Georgians for whom access to quality mental health care is so far behind where it should be that we really ought to be ashamed, in my opinion. But I'm with you. I'll vote them out. That's right. You got it. Yes, beautiful.
Hi. My question is around the homeless population. I just learned today that they're being charged 40% of their paycheck to stay in a shelter. And they're just given a bed in a large room, on a bunk, and 40%, I'm just thinking, like, how are they supposed to save money to get themselves out of that situation? 40% seems like a huge chunk of someone's salary, and they're already in a shelter. So I'm just wondering what policies are being done to combat that, what's the rationale on that, and if anything's being done, because that just seems like it's not going to help people get out of the cycle that they're already in.
I think the struggle with homelessness is a real one, and I think the city of Atlanta has wrestled with it to some degree. They do okay, and then in other times they're not doing so well. I can't speak for the city of Atlanta. I can speak for the state, and I will tell you that they're doing absolutely nothing. I will tell you that there is a bill right now matriculating that will make it easier for private citizens to sue cities who fail to appropriately address homelessness. And when my colleagues on the other side, oftentimes when they say address homelessness, they don't mean what you're talking about. Exactly. So that has been the mentality down there ever since I've gotten there. There has not, in my opinion, been a good faith effort by the majority of the folks in the General Assembly to address homelessness in any meaningful way. There certainly could be funding. There certainly could be expanding Medicaid and access to mental health care. There are so many things that we could be doing to not only help the homeless population, many of whom are veterans, that we just aren't, because it's not a priority. We'll be debating an income tax cut that will go to mostly the most wealthy folks in the state, probably tomorrow or the day after. So there's just no appetite, unfortunately, for the majority party. Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarification, the name of that bill, I just want to know for everyone, is it SB like 295 or something?
I think it's an HB number, and I don't have my phone with me. I can get it and get it to you. I don't remember. I think it's HB 2 something, but don't quote me. We have heard 295. HB 295. Thank you. Okay, that's it, guys. I love you. Keep up the good work. Keep fighting the good fight. Stay in touch. Right? We are on the right side of right, and I'm so proud of all the work that you do and your big old hearts, trying to take care of our brothers and sisters who are on their way back to becoming citizens. So I'm always an ally for that. Thank you.
All right, you all, one last thing. Again, thank you for hanging out with us for the full duration of the day. We so greatly appreciate it. I don't know what happened to the QR code. Well, since you are registered, there will be an evaluation available for you to complete. We need to hear from you if there's anything that we can do better, that we can repeat, any and all of that. We would like for you to do that. And Ann has one other comment, and I have some sheets right there for you.
If you spoke to a lawmaker today, on the back of that Bill's handout is a QR code to give us feedback about how that experience was for you. It asks about what the lawmakers said with response to the bills, and then just about your experience, what we could do to improve that experience next year. So please use that. That's on the back of the handout. Right.
I'm repeating the links for the resources and access to the live stream is on the Facebook page. So if you just happen to want to go back and take a look, what is it, Justice Reform? Justice Reform Partnership on Facebook, and you'll find the live stream on there. Thank you again.